Good afternoon, everyone. In this video, there will be three stories. The first story is about the oldest criminal in America. America in the 1930s was filled with the romance of the road and freedom of movement. Among the endless highways and crowded cities, there lived a boy whose life since childhood was surrounded by cars. His name was Charlie Henderson, and his fate was sealed to become a legend in the world of auto theft. Charlie was born in a small town in Ohio, where his father worked as a mechanic at a local auto repair shop. From an early age, he spent more time among tools and machines than among toys. At the age of 5, Charlie already knew how to start a car and change a tire. His father, proud of his son's skills, often allowed him to help in the workshop despite his young age. But despite the privilege of being near cars, Charlie often felt lonely. His mother left the family when he was only 3 years old, leaving father and son to cope with life on their own. This left a void in his heart that he tried to fill with his love for cars. One day, when Charlie was 10 years old, he accidentally witnessed his father helping a local bandit steal a car. This sight made an indelible impression on the boy, and the idea arose in his head that he too could become a master of his craft, but not a mechanic, but a car thief. Over the years, Charlie became more and more adept with cars. At school, he was considered a strange but talented boy who could fix any car. Teachers and classmates underestimated his potential, not realizing that one day this quiet teenager would become the most famous car thief in America. Charlie Henderson, despite his youthful obsession with cars, decided to take a path that was more socially acceptable. He graduated from a technical college and became a mechanical engineer, like his father. For many years, Charlie worked at a car plant in Detroit, designing and improving car engines. He was known as a talented and hard worker, but his life was devoid of adventure and thrill. By the age of 40, Charlie had a calm and stable life. He lived in a small house in the suburbs, got married, and raised 2 children. His days were filled with work and his evenings with family and hobbies. However, deep down, he always felt that something was missing. Memories of his childhood in the auto repair shop and the moment he saw his father help steal a car never left him. One evening, while returning from work, Charlie saw an old, abandoned car on the side of the road. Something inside him clicked. He stopped and walked up to the car. It was a classic 1965 Ford Mustang in terrible condition, but still majestic. Charlie decided that this was a sign that it was time to recapture the passion of his youth. The following weekend, Charlie brought the Mustang home and began restoring it. He spent long hours in the garage, working on every detail, remembering everything he knew about mechanics. Working on the car reminded him of a time when life seemed full of opportunity and adventure. After restoring the Mustang, Charlie felt a surge of energy and youth. He again felt that spark that made his heart beat faster. But along with this came the old desires, to become not just a mechanic, but a master of theft. Charlie Henderson, after restoring an old Ford Mustang, felt a surge of energy and excitement that had long since left his life. But along with this, something dark also awakened. One night, while the city was sleeping, Charlie, driven by memories and a desire for thrills, decided to steal a car. He picked the lock and started the car without difficulty, enjoying the adrenaline and speed. This first theft was just the beginning. Over the course of several months, Charlie committed several carjackings, masterfully evading the police. He felt invincible as he returned home with the loot, but one day his luck changed. One night, when Charlie once again stole a luxury car, the police ambushed him. Charlie noticed the pursuit and tried to escape, but the police blocked all exits for him. A chase began through the city streets, in which Charlie demonstrated all his driving skills. However, despite his skill, the numerical superiority and professionalism of the police played a role. Charlie was arrested after crashing into a barricade. During interrogation, he admitted to stealing several cars and revealed his methods. The trial was harsh, given the number of thefts and their scale. Charlie was sentenced to 20 years in prison for multiple vehicle thefts and endangering public safety. In prison, Charlie spent many years reflecting on his life and how his passion for cars led to such a sad outcome. Despite everything, he did not lose hope for the future. He studied books on mechanics and engineering, communicated with other prisoners, trying to find a way to atone for his guilt and start a new life after his release. But the years passed, and Charlie was no longer that young, energetic man. In prison, he faced many difficulties but never broke down. He dreamed of the day when he could be free again and find a way to use his skills for good rather than harm. Charlie Henderson was released from prison at the age of 65. A wrinkled face and gray hair testified to long years spent behind bars, but the same light still burned in his eyes as in his youth. He left prison determined to start a new life, but the world he returned to was completely different. The city has changed. Old neighborhoods were rebuilt, new car models filled the roads, and technology advanced greatly. Charlie felt like a stranger in this new world, but his passion for cars did not fade. Moreover, the years spent in prison gave him a lot of time to think and plan. At first, Charlie tried to live honestly. He got a job in a car repair shop where his skills were quickly appreciated. But the daily routine and lack of adrenaline became unbearable. One day, in the silence of the night in his humble home, he made the decision to return to his old life but with a new approach. Using the knowledge he had accumulated over the years, Charlie began to develop a heist plan that would be flawless. He studied the latest car security systems and how to bypass them. Realizing that the old methods were no longer suitable, he adapted his skills to modern technology. His first crime after leaving prison was stealing an expensive sports car. He spent several weeks studying the owner's route and the car's features. That night, when he finally carried out the hijacking, his heart began to beat again with the same adrenaline as many years ago. The successful theft confirmed his abilities and gave him confidence that he had not yet lost his touch. With each new theft, Charlie became more and more daring and inventive. He established contacts with local criminal groups, offering his services. His age and appearance helped him go unnoticed. No one expected that a 65-year-old man could be involved in car theft. Charlie quickly gained a reputation among the criminal underworld and began to be called Old Fox for his cunning and skill. He created complex theft schemes, trained young car thieves, and organized entire car theft operations. Charlie Henderson, now known as Old Fox, continued to build his reputation in the underworld. He became an unsurpassed master of car theft, capable of bypassing any modern security system. His methods became more and more sophisticated, and behind each hijacking there was a carefully thought-out plan. But despite all his experience and skill, Charlie understood that each new crime brought him closer to an inevitable collision with the law. One day, he was approached by a young car thief named Vincent, who dreamed of becoming a master like Charlie. Vincent was talented, but he lacked the experience and knowledge to become truly successful in his business. Charlie saw a part of himself in the young car thief and decided to take him under his wing. Together, they began working on complex operations, teaching Vincent all the intricacies of the craft. Vincent learned quickly, and their joint operations began to generate significant income. They formed a team of several talented car thieves and began planning larger, riskier thefts. However, their successes attracted the attention of the police, and their activities became the subject of an investigation. One day, Charlie and Vincent received an order to steal a unique car, a rare sports car that belonged to an influential businessman. This theft promised to bring huge money, but the risk was incredibly high. Charlie understood that this could be his last big business, but the excitement and desire to prove that he was still the best overpowered reasonable arguments. They began preparing for the hijacking, studying every detail of the security system and developing a plan down to the smallest detail. Finally, the day of the operation arrived. Charlie and his team infiltrated a secure area, using all their skills and tricks to bypass security and surveillance systems. Vincent demonstrated everything he had learned from his mentor by acting quickly and decisively. When they finally got to the car, Charlie felt the same joy and satisfaction that he had in his heyday, but their success did not last long. Just as they were about to leave, police arrived at the scene. A tense chase ensued through the city streets at night, and Charlie once again demonstrated his driving skills as he evaded pursuit. However, the police were well prepared and had a numerical advantage. Vincent suggested splitting up to confuse his pursuers. Charlie agreed, although he understood that this could be dangerous for Vincent. They went in different directions, and Charlie was able to temporarily escape. A few days later, Charlie learned that Vincent had been arrested. This news shocked him because he felt responsible for the fate of the young hijacker. Charlie knew he had to get Vincent out of prison, but he knew he would have to risk everything to do so. Charlie Henderson, upon hearing the news of Vincent's arrest, realized that he could not leave his student to his fate. He knew the rescue plans would be complex and dangerous, but his experience and skills could give Vincent a chance at freedom. Charlie began to develop a plan that was to become his most daring and complex undertaking. Charlie began by examining the prison where Vincent was being held. It was a well-guarded penal colony with the latest security systems. To successfully complete the mission, Charlie assembled a team of the best specialists. Hannah, a hacker capable of hacking any system, and Marcus, a former prison guard who knew all the internal procedures and weak points. The first step was to gain access to the prison plans. Hannah hacked the security system and downloaded the building's blueprints. They carefully studied every exit, every security camera, and security shift schedule. Marcus provided information about patrol routes and prison routines. The next step was preparing the equipment. They collected everything they needed: fake passes, devices to disable cameras, and even a special escape vehicle. Charlie developed several alternative contingency plans to ensure the success of the operation. Finally, the day of salvation arrived. They chose a night when security was least vigilant. Hannah disabled the security cameras and created temporary security glitches to cover up their infiltration. Marcus, dressed in a security guard's uniform, distracted the attention of his former colleagues, allowing Charlie and Hannah to get inside unhindered. Charlie and Hannah moved quickly and silently, avoiding the patrols and heading towards Vincent's cell. At this time, Marcus staged a small sabotage in another wing of the prison to attract the guards and clear the way for the team. They reached Vincent's cell, and Charlie used special tools to open the lock. Vincent was surprised and happy to see his mentor. Quickly explaining the escape plan, they headed for the exit. However, when they were almost out, one of the guards noticed them. A chase began through the corridors of the prison. Hannah quickly closed several doors behind them to slow down their pursuers. They reached the pre-prepared exit, where Marcus was waiting for them with transport. Having loaded into the car, they rushed away from the prison, avoiding prosecution. Charlie demonstrated all his driving skills, avoiding police cars and helicopters that were on alert. After a tense chase, they managed to hide in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. There they lay low, waiting for the fuss about the escape to die down. Vincent was eternally grateful to Charlie for his courage and dedication. Now that they were both free, Charlie knew they had to be careful and plan their next steps. Charlie and Vincent take refuge in an abandoned warehouse, trying to comprehend the scale and consequences of their daring escape. The police were looking for them all over the city, and their faces were on the front pages of newspapers and news programs. Charlie understood that they not only needed to hide, but also come up with a plan to disappear from the radar of law enforcement agencies for a long time. Charlie, Vincent, Hannah, and Marcus got together to discuss their next steps. They decided that it was too dangerous to stay in the city, and they needed to find a place where they could get lost. Hannah suggested going to a small town in the desert where an acquaintance of hers owned a car repair shop and could provide them with shelter. On the way to this town, Charlie and Vincent exchanged thoughts and experiences. Vincent was determined to continue his crime spree, but Charlie knew they needed to change their strategy to survive. He suggested focusing on more subtle and sophisticated methods that would allow them to operate unnoticed. When they arrived in the town, Hannah's acquaintance, Joe, greeted them with cordiality. Joe was a former car thief who had given up a life of crime and now lived a quiet life fixing cars. He agreed to help Charlie and his team by providing them with shelter and the necessary resources. Charlie came up with a new plan. Use Joe's auto repair shop as a front for his operations. They could restore and sell rare cars, while using their skills to steal and resell expensive cars throughout the region. This plan would allow them to operate more covertly and minimize the risk of being caught. The team began to act according to a new plan. They installed modern equipment in the car service center and established distribution channels for stolen cars. Hannah hacked into several databases to create false documents for the machines, while Marcus ensured the security of their operations. Over time, things improved. They began receiving orders for rare and expensive cars from wealthy clients looking to add to their collections. Each theft was carefully planned, and the team acted smoothly and quickly. Their activities went unnoticed by the police, and they enjoyed success. But one day, an unexpected guest came to them. It was Charlie's former prison colleague, Mike, who learned about their success and decided to take advantage of their help. He invited Charlie and his team to participate in the robbery of a large car dealership where cars worth millions of dollars were stored. Mike promised huge profits, but the risks were incredibly high. Charlie knew this case could put them back on the police radar and jeopardize everything they had achieved. But Vincent and the rest of the team were excited about the prospect of a big deal. Charlie was faced with a difficult choice: risk everything for huge profits or continue to act carefully and secretly. Charlie stood in front of the team, thinking about Mike's proposal. He felt that the risk might be too great, but he saw in the eyes of Vincent and the others the desire to test their strength and make big money. Finally, he made a decision. "We'll do it, but only if the plan is perfect," Charlie said. "We can't afford to make a mistake." The team set about developing a detailed robbery plan. Hannah hacked the car dealership's security system, gaining access to surveillance cameras and security schedules. Marcus studied the area and plotted an escape route. Vincent prepared equipment and vehicles for the theft. Charlie, as always, controlled every stage and made his own adjustments. The day of the operation arrived. At night, the team entered the territory of the car dealership. Hannah turned off the cameras and Marcus distracted the guards. Vincent and Charlie picked the locks and got inside. Time was short, and they quickly began loading the cars onto prepared trucks. But things didn't go according to plan. One of the security guards noticed suspicious activity and called the police. Charlie heard sirens in the distance and realized they only had a few minutes. He ordered the team to speed up and load the last cars. The sirens were getting closer, and the team rushed away from the car dealership, taking expensive cars with them. A tense chase began through the city streets. Charlie showed off his driving skills by evading pursuit and maneuvering between cars, but the police were persistent and used helicopters to track. Charlie directed the team to a previously prepared shelter, an old warehouse outside the city. There, they hid the cars and extinguished all traces. The helicopters lost sight of them and the police were unable to find cover. The team was able to breathe a sigh of relief, realizing that they had once again avoided arrest. However, this case attracted the attention not only of the police, but also of other criminal groups. A few days later, Charlie was visited by an envoy from one of the city's largest crime syndicates. He offered Charlie and his team cooperation, promising huge profits and protection from the police. Charlie knew that this proposal could change their lives. On the one hand, Cooperation with such a powerful ally could give them greater opportunities and resources. On the other hand, it could lead them into an even more dangerous world, where the stakes were much higher. Charlie listened to the envoy's proposal and sent it back, promising to discuss it with the team. In the evening, they gathered in their shelter to make a decision. Charlie understood that working with a crime syndicate could provide them with protection and new opportunities, but also carried great risks. Charlie expressed his thoughts to the team. Vincent, full of enthusiasm, supported the idea, believing that cooperation with the syndicate would give them security and new horizons. Marcus noted that this would give them more resources and information, and Hannah emphasized that their technical abilities could improve significantly with the support of a powerful partner. After weighing all the arguments, Charlie decided to agree to cooperate, but to act carefully. He sent a response to the envoy, and a few days later a meeting took place with the head of the syndicate, Victor. Victor turned out to be a cunning and charismatic leader, skillfully managing his affairs and knowing how to manage his people. Charlie's team began working for the syndicate, performing complex and risky assignments. Initially, their tasks included stealing rare and expensive cars, reselling them on the black market, and performing other sensitive transactions. Working for the syndicate opened up new horizons for them, giving them access to resources and information that were previously unavailable to them. Over time, Charlie and his team became indispensable to the syndicate. Their skills and experience allowed them to accomplish tasks that others thought were impossible. Charlie began to feel more confident in his new status, but he did not forget to be careful. He understood that any wrong move could lead to fatal consequences. One day, the syndicate assigned Charlie and his team to steal a rare prototype car that was kept in a highly guarded hangar. The task was extremely difficult and dangerous, but the reward promised to be incredible. Charlie and his team began to carefully prepare for the operation, studying all the details and developing a plan down to the smallest detail. The day of the operation arrived. They entered the hangar area, bypassing all security systems and patrols. Charlie and Vincent picked the locks and got inside, beginning the process of stealing the prototype. Suddenly, security noticed their presence and a tense chase began. Charlie and his team barely escaped the hangar, but the case attracted the attention of the authorities and other criminal groups. The police and rivals began hunting them, and Charlie realized that they were in the middle of a major conflict. Despite all the difficulties, Charlie and his team continued to work, constantly finding new ways to avoid danger and complete tasks. Their life turned into a constant running on a knife's edge, where every mistake could cost them their freedom or even their lives. Charlie and his team continued to exist in a world where every day was filled with danger and adrenaline. They became an integral part of the syndicate, performing tasks that others thought impossible. Charlie's reputation as the old fox only grew, and his skills as a rustler were considered second to none. One of the most difficult operations they had to carry out was the theft of a highly protected vehicle carrying valuable technology. Charlie knew that this task was a test of their abilities and loyalty from the syndicate. He developed a plan that included several stages: hacking the security system, distracting the guards, and quickly escaping. The team carefully prepared for the operation. Hannah hacked the security system, causing the cameras and alarms to be temporarily disabled. Marcus, using his knowledge of security patrols, created a distraction by creating false alarms. Vincent and Charlie entered the building and quickly began moving valuable technology into a specially prepared transport. Everything went according to plan, but at the last moment there was an unexpected failure in the security system. Security discovered the intrusion and a fierce firefight began. Charlie and his team were able to escape the building, but their path to freedom was cut off by numerous patrols. Using all his skills, Charlie led the team through the secret exit they had prepared in case of an emergency. Having escaped from under the nose of the guards, they went to a previously prepared shelter. There, They assessed their loot and realized that they had managed to capture not only valuable technology, but also documents that could have jeopardized the syndicate's entire operation. It was too valuable to be ignored. Realizing that they were in the middle of a serious conflict, Charlie decided to meet with Victor and discuss further actions. Victor was impressed by their success, but also realized that the situation had become too dangerous. He suggested that the team lay low temporarily and engage in less risky operations until the hype died down. Charlie agreed, and the team moved to another city where they began working under the guise of a legal business. They continued to carry out small tasks for the syndicate, but now acted more carefully and secretly. This allowed them to remain undetected and avoid unnecessary attention. Several months passed and the team's life returned to a calmer direction, but Charlie knew it wouldn't last long. In the world of crime, there is always a new threat, a new challenge, and he must be prepared for any surprises. Deep down, he felt that the real test was yet to come, and he prepared for it by improving his skills and developing new strategies. Several months passed, and Charlie and his team established a new rhythm of life in another city. They continued to operate in secret, completing tasks for the syndicate and improving their skills. Soon, Charlie received a new task: steal 2 rare and expensive cars belonging to a wealthy businessman. These cars not only cost millions, but were also equipped with the latest safety systems. Charlie began to develop a plan that included several stages. First of all, he collected all available information about the businessman and his garage. Marcus studied the guards' habits and patrol schedules, and Hannah hacked the security system to gain access to the internal security cameras and alarms. Charlie knew that the cars were kept in a private collection located in a secure area. The plan involved breaking into the garage under the guise of maintenance. Marcus, using his connections, obtained fake documents and forms for the team. They were supposed to identify themselves as car maintenance specialists, which would allow them to get inside without suspicion. On the day of the operation, the team arrived at the scene in the uniform of car service employees. Hannah temporarily disabled the security cameras to ensure their intrusion went undetected. Marcus distracted the guards by explaining that they were there for emergency maintenance ordered by the owner. Charlie and Vincent, armed with the necessary equipment, entered the garage. Inside the garage, they quickly found the cars they needed. These were 2 rare sports cars, one modified for racing and the other a collector's item. Charlie and Vincent began working to disable the security systems and prepare the cars for theft. At this time, Hannah tracked the movement of the guards in order to warn the team in time about a possible threat. The process went according to plan, and soon both cars were ready to go. Marcus signaled that everything was clear, and Charlie and Vincent drove out of the garage, heading towards a previously prepared shelter. However, their success did not go unnoticed. One of the security guards noticed suspicious activity and raised the alarm. A chase ensued, but Charlie and Vincent, using their driving skills and carefully planned routes, managed to elude pursuit. They arrived at the hideout where the team quickly camouflaged the vehicles and began preparing to resell them. Despite the successful completion of the operation, Charlie knew that they were now under close surveillance. He understood that each next step must be even more thoughtful and careful. The wealthy businessman's security had been alerted, and now every operation could turn out to be a fatal mistake. After successfully stealing 2 rare cars from a wealthy businessman, Charlie and his team decided to lie low to avoid unnecessary attention. They knew their latest case had attracted the attention of both the police and rival criminal gangs. Meanwhile, they carefully prepared the cars for resale, changing their appearance and falsifying documents. Several weeks passed quietly. Charlie felt that the tension was gradually subsiding and they could return to more active activities, but he understood that the next step had to be thought out to the smallest detail. Vincent offered to take on another large order, the theft of a car, which was kept in one of the most protected private collections in the city. Charlie agreed but decided that the preparation for this operation should be even more thorough than the previous ones. He assembled a team and began developing a plan. Hannah hacked the collection's security system, gaining access to the security schedule and internal cameras. Marcus examined the area and found several weak points in the security. Vincent prepared equipment for breaking locks and alarm systems. The day of the operation arrived. The team entered the collection area under cover of night. Hannah disabled the cameras and created temporary security glitches. Marcus distracted the guards by setting up a false alarm at the other end of the territory. Charlie and Vincent, using their skills, entered the garage and began breaking into the car. Everything was going according to plan, but suddenly, the security system was activated. It turned out that the owners of the collection had installed additional precautions that the team was not aware of. The alarm began, and the guards were quickly approaching. Charlie and Vincent realized they didn't have much time. They decided to split up. Vincent remained to complete the hacking of the car, and Charlie went to meet the guards in order to distract them. Charlie, using his experience and dexterity, managed to lead the guards behind him. Vincent, having completed the hack, quickly drove the car out of the garage and headed to the meeting place. Charlie, having escaped pursuit, also arrived at the place where Marcus was waiting for them with a prepared escape vehicle. The team was once again in pursuit, but thanks to their skill and carefully planned route, they managed to evade pursuit. They reached the shelter, where they quickly hid the car and began preparing for its resale. Despite all the difficulties, the operation was successful. However, Charlie knew that each new success made them a target for more and more enemies. He understood that they needed to constantly improve and be prepared for any surprises. At the same time, they became increasingly visible in the criminal world, which inevitably led to new challenges and dangers. Despite everything, Charlie and his team continued to operate, remaining one of the most talented and elusive hijackers. Their reputation grew, but so did their risks. Charlie understood that the real tests were yet to come, and they must be prepared for any difficulties that might come their way. Charlie and his team continued to remain at the top of the criminal world, carrying out increasingly daring and complex operations. However, with each success, not only their reputation and income grew, but also the number of enemies. Criminal groups and competitors increasingly tried to track them down, and the police intensified efforts to catch them. One day, as the team was preparing for another big case, Charlie received an unexpected message. One of his old acquaintances, an informant named Lucas, warned him that they were being hunted by a powerful criminal organization known for its cruelty and mercilessness. This organization was unhappy that the successes of Charlie and his team began to overshadow their own achievements. Charlie realized that the situation was becoming critical. He gathered the team and told them about the new threat. They decided that for a while they needed to hide and do exclusively safe and inconspicuous things so as not to attract unnecessary attention. At the same time, Hannah began studying information about this organization in order to understand their weaknesses and possible methods of defense. For several months, the team acted cautiously, performing only small tasks and avoiding major operations. But Charlie understood that such a life could not last forever. They needed to find a way to deal with the new threat and regain their freedom of action. Hannah, using her hacking skills, managed to gain access to the organization's internal data. She discovered that they had one vulnerable point: a large warehouse where illegal cargo and valuable documents were stored. Charlie proposed a plan. They would make a daring attack on the warehouse, steal important documents, and destroy all valuables. This will deal a serious blow to enemies and force them to retreat. The team began preparing for the operation. Hannah studied the warehouse's security system and developed a plan to disable it. Marcus and Vincent prepared equipment and vehicles for their escape. Charlie thought through every step of the operation to minimize risks. The day of the attack arrived. The The team entered the warehouse using their skills and equipment. Hannah turned off the security systems and they quickly got inside. Inside the warehouse, Charlie and Vincent began searching for valuable documents while Marcus set up explosives to destroy the cargo. The operation was successful, but at the last moment they encountered armed guards. A firefight ensued, and Charlie, using his experience, was able to lead the team out of the fire. They managed to pick up the necessary documents and leave the warehouse before the explosions destroyed everything inside. Returning to their hideout, the team analyzed the stolen documents. It turned out that among them there was compromising information that could be used against the leaders of the criminal organization. Charlie decided to pass this information on to the authorities in order to deal a crushing blow to his enemies and weaken their position. The police, having received information from an anonymous source, carried out a series of successful raids, arresting many members of the criminal organization. This weakened them significantly and gave Charlie and his team temporary relief. Despite their success, Charlie knew that their lives were still full of dangers. The enemies were not going to give up, and each new operation could be the last. But the team was ready for any challenge, confident in their strengths and abilities. They continued to operate, constantly improving and staying one step ahead of their enemies. Despite the temporary relief, Charlie knew that their enemies would not stop. The criminal organization they had weakened could seek revenge. During this time, the team continued to act cautiously, performing only those tasks that did not attract much attention. One day, Charlie received news that shocked him to the core. Lucas, their old informant, was found dead. This was a clear sign that the organization was beginning to take revenge for its loss. Charlie knew they were now in the crosshairs and they needed to take immediate action. The team decided to lay low and temporarily stop all operations. They moved to another city and began working under new names. However, Charlie could not sit quietly knowing that the threat still existed. He decided to be proactive and developed a plan for the final destruction of his enemies. With Hannah's help, Charlie learned that the leader of a criminal organization has a secret hideout where he stores all his assets and manages his operations. Charlie realized that a strike on this shelter could end their persecution. He assembled a team and began planning the operation. Marcus studied the security route and the location of security cameras around the hideout. Vincent prepared burglary and demolition equipment. Hannah hacked the security system to gain access to the shelter's internal data. Charlie developed a break-in and escape plan, taking into account all possible risks. The day of the operation arrived. The team entered the refuge at night using their skills and equipment. Hannah turned off the cameras and alarms, allowing Charlie, Marcus, and Vincent to sneak inside unnoticed. They knew they had limited time before the guards discovered their presence. Inside the hideout, they began searching for valuable assets and information that could help destroy the organization. Charlie found a safe containing documents and account access codes. During this time, Marcus set up explosives to destroy anything they couldn't take with them. Vincent, while monitoring the situation, kept in touch with Hannah to keep abreast of all changes in the security system. Everything was going according to plan, but suddenly one of the guards noticed them and raised the alarm. A firefight broke out and the team found themselves trapped. Charlie, using his experience and skills, was able to lead the team out of the fire, but time was running out. They managed to pick up documents and codes, after which they quickly left the shelter before the explosion. Returning to the shelter, the team analyzed the obtained documents. It turned out that among them were not only financial reports and accounts, but also compromising information on many influential people associated with the criminal organization. This was the key to their victory. Charlie decided to hand over this data to the authorities in order to deal the final blow to his enemies. The police, having received anonymous information, carried out a series of successful raids and arrested many of the organization's leaders. This ended the persecution and provided the team with temporary relief. Despite the success achieved, Charlie understood that the world of crime is always full of dangers. He knew that new challenges awaited them ahead, and they must be prepared for any surprises. The team continued to improve and prepare for new challenges, staying one step ahead of their enemies. Charlie and his team, having achieved temporary relief after destroying their enemy, knew that peace would be short-lived. The world of crime is unforgiving, and new threats could appear at any moment. The team decided not to waste any time and continued to improve their skills in preparation for future challenges. One day, Charlie received an offer that seemed too tempting to refuse. They were offered to steal an exclusive car that had recently been delivered to the city for a private collector. This car was not only rare, but also had unique technical characteristics, which made it extremely valuable on the black market. The customer promised a huge reward for successful completion of the task. Charlie, despite the risks, decided to take on the challenge. He assembled a team and began developing a plan. Hannah, as always, hacked the collector's security system, gaining access to surveillance cameras and alarms. Marcus studied security and patrol routes, and Vincent prepared equipment for picking locks and security systems. The day of the operation arrived. The team infiltrated the collector's mansion at night using their skills and equipment. Hannah turned off the cameras and alarms, allowing Charlie and Vincent to sneak inside. Marcus remained outside to monitor the situation and warn of a possible threat. Inside the mansion, Charlie and Vincent found a garage where an exclusive car was stored. They quickly disabled the car's security system and began preparing to steal it. Suddenly, they heard a noise. The guards began to suspect something was wrong. Charlie realized they didn't have much time. They drove out of the garage, but the guards noticed them and began to pursue them. A tense chase began through the narrow streets of the city. Charlie showed off his driving skills by evading pursuit and maneuvering between cars. Vincent, sitting nearby, coordinated with Hannah and Marcus. The chase led them to an abandoned industrial area, where the team prepared a hideout. They managed to evade pursuit and hide the car. The reward for completing the task was generous, but Charlie knew that now they were under the gun again. The police and competitors began searching for them with renewed vigor. The team decided to temporarily hide and change their location. They moved to another city, where they began to work under new names and legends. Several months passed, and the team's life returned to a calmer direction. However, Charlie knew that sooner or later they would have to face new threats. He continued to develop new plans and strategies to always be prepared for any eventuality. One day, when the team was preparing for another operation, they received a mysterious letter. It contained information about a major operation to transport illegal goods, which was planned by one of the largest criminal organizations. The letter hinted at the possibility of not only disrupting the operation, but also making huge profits. Charlie and his team began an investigation to understand who was behind the letter and what risks might be associated with the operation. They learned that the cargo would be transported through a carefully guarded route, and any mistake could cost them their lives. Despite all the risks, Charlie decided that this operation could be their chance to deal a serious blow to their enemies and strengthen their position in the criminal world. He assembled a team and began developing a plan that included several stages: reconnaissance of the route, preparation of equipment, and coordination of actions. Charlie and his team carefully prepared for an operation to disrupt a major transportation of illegal goods. Realizing that the route would be closely guarded, they developed a multi-step plan involving reconnaissance, coordination, and the use of their unique skills. The first step was reconnaissance of the route. Marcus and Vincent spent several days observing the movements of the guards and studying the patrol schedule. They also identified several potential points for ambush and escape. Hannah hacked the security systems of shipping companies to gain access to internal information and route plans. The next step was preparing the equipment. The team purchased several high-performance vehicles capable of quickly maneuvering and escaping pursuit. Vincent installed special equipment in them to hack and disable security systems, as well as devices to interfere with security radio signals. The day of the operation arrived. Charlie, Marcus, Vincent, and Hannah took up their positions along the transport route. They knew that they would have only a few minutes to carry out the attack and escape before reinforcements arrived. The plan involved creating several false alarms to divert the attention of security and police. Once the truck carrying the illegal goods arrived at the location, Hannah jammed the radio signals, disrupting security communications. Marcus and Vincent blocked the road on both sides, forcing the truck to stop. Charlie and Vincent quickly disarmed the guards and began unloading the valuable cargo into their vehicles. Everything was going according to plan, but suddenly additional security appeared. A firefight ensued and the team found themselves in a dangerous situation. Charlie used his skills and experience to lead the team out from under fire. They managed to take a significant part of the cargo and escape before reinforcements arrived. The chase continued through the city streets. The team split up to confuse their pursuers. Charlie, demonstrating incredible driving skills, was able to lead some of the guards aside, giving Vincent and Marcus the opportunity to escape with the cargo. Hannah coordinated the team's actions, creating false signals and distracting the police. Eventually, the team made it to their hideout. They were exhausted, but pleased with the success of the operation. The captured cargo turned out to be even more valuable than they expected. Inside were not only illegal goods, but also important documents revealing the activities of a criminal organization. Charlie knew that they now held the key to victory over their enemy. They could use these documents to destroy the remnants of the organization and provide themselves with long-awaited peace of mind. The team began to carefully analyze the information to develop a plan for the final strike. Despite the success of the operation, Charlie understood that his enemies would not sit idly by. They will look for ways to take revenge and regain their positions. The team continued to improve and prepare for new challenges, knowing that their fight was not over yet. Charlie and his team carefully examined the captured documents. They contained information about a network of corrupt officials and police supporting a criminal organization. It was a powerful weapon capable of destroying the entire structure of the enemy. Charlie decided to tread carefully to make the most of this information. The first step was to create a plan to distribute incriminating materials. Hannah, using her hacking skills, began preparing for the mass distribution of data on the internet. The team decided to act anonymously to protect themselves from possible retaliation. They also decided to contact several independent journalists and activists so that they could publish the materials and attract the attention of the public and the authorities. While Hannah was doing the technical part, Charlie and Vincent organized several meetings with influential people who could help them in this matter. They turned to former allies and people who suffered from the actions of the criminal organization. Together, they formed a coalition ready to support them in the fight. Marcus, using his connections, began to spread rumors among criminal circles that the organization was beginning to fall apart from the inside. This led to many members of the organization becoming suspicious of each other and trying to save their own interests. Internal conflicts and mistrust began to undermine the enemy's foundations. When Hannah completed her preparations, the team began a campaign to make the materials public. Thousands of documents have appeared on the internet exposing corruption and criminal activities of the organization. Independent journalists published articles and reports that quickly attracted the attention of the public and authorities. A wave of indignation swept the city, and the police were forced to launch an investigation. A criminal organization found itself at the center of a scandal. Their leaders began to go into hiding, trying to avoid arrests. The police carried out a series of successful raids, arresting many members of the organization and their corrupt allies. Charlie and his team watched events unfold from hiding, knowing that their plan had worked. Despite the success, Charlie understood that the victory was not yet final. Some of the enemies could remain free and try to take revenge. The team decided not to relax and continue to act carefully. They began to develop new plans and strategies to always be prepared for any eventuality. Several months passed, and the situation in the city began to stabilize. The criminal organization was practically destroyed, and many of its leaders were behind bars. Charlie and his team began to gradually return to normal life, doing legal business and avoiding unnecessary attention. However, one day they received news that alarmed them again. One of the remaining leaders of the organization, nicknamed King, united the remaining members and began to restore his empire. He was determined to take revenge on Charlie and his team for ruining his business. Charlie realized that the fight was not over yet. He assembled a team and began to develop a plan to finally destroy King and his people. They knew that this battle would be the most difficult and dangerous, but they were ready for anything to protect themselves and finally end the threat. Charlie, who was 71 years old at the time, became one of the most dangerous and famous figures in the criminal world, America. His experience, cunning, and incredible ability to evade justice have made him a legend among criminals. Despite his age, Charlie remained in excellent physical shape and was ready for new challenges. The resurgence of King and his organization was a serious threat that could not be ignored. Charlie understood that, in order to finally defeat King, it was necessary to develop a complex and multi-stage plan. He gathered his team and began discussing strategy. The first step was to study the new operations of King and his allies. Hannah, using her hacking skills, hacked into the organization's internal networks to gain access to plans and schedules. She also discovered that King was planning a major arms deal that could significantly strengthen his position. Charlie decided that their main goal would be to disrupt this deal and at the same time strike at key figures in the organization. The team began preparations, developing several alternative contingency plans. Marcus, using his connections, found out about the place and time of the transaction. Vincent prepared equipment and transport for the operation, while Hannah continued to monitor enemy communications to keep abreast of any changes. The day of the operation arrived. The team split into two groups. Charlie and Vincent headed to the deal to disrupt it, while Marcus and Hannah provided cover and coordination. They chose the moment when King's guards were least vigilant to launch a surprise attack. Charlie and Vincent arrived at the scene of the transaction and quickly neutralized the security. They managed to seize weapons and blow up the warehouse, which led to serious losses for King's organization. At the same time, Marcus and Hannah tracked the movements of King and his key allies. However, King turned out to be more cunning than they expected. He managed to evade arrest and took refuge with the remaining members of his organization. Realizing that the battle was not over yet, Charlie decided to use the remaining documents and information to find new evidence. The team spent several weeks analyzing the data and figuring out where King might have hidden. They learned that he was hiding in an abandoned factory outside the city, where he planned to regroup and strike back. Charlie decided to act immediately. He assembled a team and developed a plan to storm the factory. They knew that this would be a dangerous operation, but they could not retreat. The team entered the factory under cover of darkness using their skills and equipment. A fierce firefight broke out inside the factory. Charlie and Vincent made their way to the control center where King was located, while Marcus and Hannah provided cover and distracted the guards. Charlie, using his years of experience and tactical savvy, managed to neutralize the key guards and get to King. In a tense final showdown, Charlie and King went head-to-head. Charlie, despite his age, has shown that he is still one of the most dangerous criminals in America. He managed to win, capturing King and putting an end to his criminal empire. The team, having completed the operation, realized that they had achieved their goal. Charlie, although he knew that the world of crime was always full of surprises, this time felt that they had truly won. However, He also understood that a quiet life for them was still in question, and they always needed to be prepared for new challenges. With the victory over King, Charlie and his team achieved significant success. However, in the world of crime, there is never complete security. Although their enemy was defeated, they knew that new threats could appear at any moment. Charlie, despite his age, remained alert and continued to develop new strategies to protect his team. Several months have passed. The team enjoyed the temporary lull, doing legitimate business and avoiding unnecessary attention. However, one day they received disturbing news. Someone began to methodically collect information about them. This was a new enemy trying to figure out their weaknesses and find ways to strike. Charlie realized that they were under fire again. He gathered the team and discussed a plan of action. They decided to use their cunning and experience to identify and neutralize the new enemy before it struck a serious blow. Hannah began investigating, using her hacking skills to determine the source of the threat. She discovered that they were backed by an international criminal organization determined to seize control of the territory they were protecting. This organization was characterized by cruelty and ruthlessness, and its leaders were considered among the most dangerous in the world. Charlie decided to be proactive. He developed a plan that involved several steps. First, to gather information about the organization's key figures, then to identify their weaknesses and attack their operations. The team split into groups to complete these tasks. Marcus and Vincent went on a reconnaissance mission to determine the location of the organization's headquarters and find out the details of their operations. Hannah continued to hack security systems, gaining access to the enemy's internal data and plans. Charlie coordinated the team's actions, developing tactical moves and ensuring security. The team soon learned that the organization was planning a major operation to transport illegal goods across the border. This was the perfect opportunity to strike and weaken their position. Charlie developed a plan to disrupt the operation, which included a surprise attack and destruction of the cargo. On the day of the operation, the team took up positions along the transportation route. Hannah jammed the organization's communication system to make security coordination difficult. Marcus and Vincent prepared traps and set explosives to seal off escape routes. Charlie, as always, controlled every step. When the convoy with the cargo approached the desired location, the team attacked. They acted quickly and smoothly, neutralizing the guards and destroying the cargo. The firefight was short, but fierce. Charlie and his team once again demonstrated their skills by escaping pursuit and hiding in an abandoned building on the outskirts of the city. After a successful operation, they returned to their hideout and began to analyze the results. They managed to capture important documents and evidence that could help in the further destruction of the organization. However, they understood that this was only the beginning of a long struggle. Charlie and his team continued to operate, developing new plans and strategies. They knew that the world of crime is always full of unexpected turns and dangers, but they were ready for any challenge. Every day they improved their skills, stayed one step ahead of their enemies, and prepared for new challenges. Charlie and his team, despite the successful operation, realized that their fight against an international criminal organization had only just begun. In the captured documents, they discovered a wealth of valuable information, including the names of key figures, financial flows, and plans for upcoming operations. This gave them the opportunity to deliver a series of blows to the enemy, weakening him from the inside. Hannah continued to hack into enemy security systems, obtaining more and more data. She found out that the leader of the organization was a man named Maximilian Graham, known for his cruelty and ruthlessness. Maximilian was inaccessible, always hiding behind a thick curtain of security and false leads. Charlie decided that destroying Graham would be the key to defeating the organization. The first step was to destroy the enemy's financial base. The team learned of several secret accounts and investments that supported the organization's activities. Charlie and Hannah devised a plan to hack into these accounts and transfer funds to charities in order to cause a financial crisis for the enemy. Vincent and Marcus began the physical destruction of illegal assets, including warehouses with weapons and drugs. Operation was successfully completed. Over the course of several weeks, the team dealt a series of blows to the financial and material base of the organization. This caused panic among its members, many of whom began to leave the ranks, realizing that the organization was losing strength. However, Maximilian Graham remained at large and was preparing a retaliatory strike. Charlie knew that the next step would be the most dangerous. He decided that he needed to bring Graham into the light and destroy him. Hannah managed to find out that Graham was planning to hold a large meeting of his remaining allies in one of his secret hideouts. This was a rare opportunity to strike at the very heart of the enemy. The team began to prepare for the operation. They developed a plan to enter the shelter and neutralize the guards. Charlie, realizing that age could be a barrier, entrusted the most dangerous tasks to Vincent and Marcus, but he himself was also ready to join the fight if necessary. The day of the operation arrived. The team entered the shelter using their skills and equipment. Hannah disabled the security system, allowing them access inside. Marcus and Vincent moved quickly and silently, neutralizing the guards and leaving a clear path behind them. When they reached the main hall where the meeting was taking place, Charlie gave the signal to attack. The explosives set by Marcus went off, creating chaos and panic among the enemies. The team burst into the hall and began neutralizing the remaining opponents. Vincent and Marcus showed all their skills, effectively destroying enemies and protecting the team. Maximilian Graham stood in the middle of the hall. He was surprised and stunned to see his carefully built organization crumble before his eyes. Charlie, despite his age, approached him and, in a short but brutal duel, won. Maximilian was defeated, and his organization was completely destroyed. The team, despite the success, understood that the danger had not yet passed. They quickly left the shelter and returned to their shelter. There they began to analyze the results of the operation and develop plans for the future. Charlie knew that they were now targets for anyone who wanted to take Graham's place, but he was confident that together they would be able to withstand any threats and continue their struggle for survival in this dangerous world. After the destruction of Maximilian Graham's organization and a temporary lull, Charlie and his team decided that the time had come for a new, ambitious operation. This time, their target was a billionaire known for his illegal affairs and corruption schemes. The owner of a rare jewelry collection, he became the team's next target. The plan was to rob his car, in which he often transported his valuable assets. Hannah began by collecting all available information about the billionaire, his security and travel routes. She hacked his electronic devices to find out his schedule and security details. Marcus and Vincent began studying routes and preparing equipment for the operation. Charlie developed a plan that included several steps. The first step was reconnaissance. Marcus and Vincent followed the billionaire for several days, studying his habits and daily routine. They found out that he regularly transports his jewelry on the same route with a high level of security. The next step was preparing the equipment. The team purchased several fast and maneuverable cars equipped with special devices for hacking and disabling security systems. Vincent also prepared traps and means to distract the guards. On the day of the operation, the team took up positions along the billionaire's route. Hannah hacked into the security communication system to create interference and make coordination difficult. Marcus and Vincent set up false roadblocks and diversions to delay the guards and give Charlie the opportunity to act. When the billionaire's motorcade arrived at the desired location, the team began the operation. Marcus and Vincent created a fake accident to stop the motorcade. Hannah used her skills to disable the surveillance cameras and alarm systems. Charlie and Vincent quickly neutralized the guards and began breaking into the billionaire's car. Everything went according to plan, But at the last moment, the situation became more complicated. The guards turned out to be better prepared than they expected, and a shootout began. Charlie and his team acted quickly and efficiently, using all their skills to avoid traps and emerge victorious from the battle. Ultimately, they managed to seize the billionaire's car and extract valuable jewelry from it. They quickly left the operation site and headed to a previously prepared shelter. The chase continued, but the team, thanks to a carefully thought-out plan, managed to escape and avoid prosecution. Returning to their hideout, Charlie and his team began to analyze the results of the operation. They not only seized jewelry, but also found important documents in the car that could help expose the billionaire's illegal affairs. It was an important victory that not only brought them significant profits, but also provided an opportunity to strike a blow against corruption schemes. However, despite their success, Charlie realized that their actions had attracted the attention of powerful enemies. They knew that the billionaire would not leave this matter unpunished and would look for ways to take revenge. The team decided to be proactive and prepare for possible attacks. They began to develop new plans and strategies to protect themselves and their interests. Charlie, despite his age, continued to be a leader, ready for any challenge. He knew that their struggle for survival in this dangerous world continued, and they must be prepared for new challenges and surprises. After a successful heist and the recovery of jewelry and documents from a billionaire's car, Charlie and his team knew that revenge would not be long in coming. They understood that they needed to prepare for new attacks and be prepared for any surprises. To this end, they began to strengthen security measures and develop new strategies. The first step was to strengthen the shelter. Hannah installed new security systems and surveillance cameras to ensure the area was constantly monitored. Marcus began strengthening the perimeter and creating additional shelters in case of emergency evacuation. Vincent prepared several alternate routes for a quick escape if the need arose. Charlie, in turn, continued to analyze the captured documents. He found plenty of evidence of the billionaire's corruption schemes, which could be used to deal another blow to his reputation and business. They decided that the next step would be to share this information with independent journalists and activists in order to cause public outrage and pressure on the billionaire from the authorities. While the team was preparing for the new stage, they continued to monitor the actions of the billionaire and his guards. One day, Hannah discovered that the billionaire had hired a group of mercenaries to find and destroy Charlie's team. This was a serious threat that required immediate action. Charlie made a decision. They would not wait for the mercenaries to find them, but would strike first. The team began to develop a plan to neutralize the mercenaries. Hannah hacked into their communications and found out the location of their base. Marcus and Vincent prepared their equipment and developed a tactical plan for the attack. The day of the operation arrived. The team entered the mercenary base under cover of darkness. Hannah turned off the security systems again to ensure their intrusion would go undetected. Marcus and Vincent began neutralizing the guards, acting quickly and silently. Charlie, as always, controlled every step, coordinating the team's actions. Operation was successfully completed. The team was able to take the mercenaries by surprise, destroying their base and neutralizing all enemies. This was a significant achievement and gave them some time to breathe and move forward. Returning to the shelter, Charlie and his team realized that their situation was becoming increasingly dangerous. They decided to temporarily suspend major operations and focus on defending and strengthening their positions. At the same time, they continued to collect information and prepare new strikes against their enemies. Several weeks passed in relative calm. The team was analyzing information and preparing for possible new attacks. However, Charlie knew that new challenges awaited them. The world of crime does not forgive weaknesses, and they must be prepared for any surprises. One day, when Charlie and his team were planning their next operation, they received an unexpected message. It contained information that the billionaire was preparing a major deal with one of the most powerful crime bosses in the country. This deal could significantly strengthen his position and deal a serious blow to Charlie's team. Charlie understood that this was their chance to deliver a decisive blow to the enemy and prevent disaster. He assembled a team and began to develop a plan to disrupt the deal. They knew that this would be the most dangerous and difficult operation during their entire struggle, but they were ready for any risks. The team began preparations. Hannah hacked the security systems of the transaction site and gained access to the security plans. Marcus and Vincent prepared equipment and vehicles for a quick evacuation. Charlie developed a tactical plan that took into account all possible risks and unforeseen circumstances. The day of the operation arrived. The team entered the transaction area, acting quickly and covertly. They took up positions and began preparing for the attack. Hannah disabled the communication systems to create chaos and interfere with security coordination. Marcus and Vincent began to neutralize the guards, paving the way to the transaction site. When they reached the main hall where the transaction was taking place, Charlie gave the signal to attack. The sudden attack took the enemies by surprise. A fierce firefight ensued, but the team, thanks to its experience and teamwork, was able to emerge victorious. They destroyed all valuables and documents related to the deal and captured key figures, including the billionaire himself. Returning to the shelter, the team began to analyze the results of the operation. They knew that they had dealt a serious blow to the enemy and averted disaster. However, Charlie understood that their fight was not over yet. They must be prepared for new challenges and surprises as they continue their dangerous game in the world of crime. Several years have passed since the last major operation. Charlie and his team remained at the top of the criminal world, but age and constant stress were beginning to take their toll on Charlie. He became more cautious and less risk-averse, realizing that each new case could be his last. One day, Charlie received information about a new enemy, an ambitious and cruel crime boss named Darius, who decided to destroy Charlie and seize his territory. Darius was young, cruel, and ready to do anything for power. Charlie understood that this enemy would be more difficult than all the previous ones. The team began to prepare for the inevitable fight. Hannah hacked Darius's security systems to gather information about his operations and plans. Marcus and Vincent were engaged in reconnaissance and preparing shelters in case they had to retreat. Charlie, despite his age, continued to develop strategy and coordinate the team's actions. The day of the decisive operation arrived. The team infiltrated Darius's territory to strike his main assets and thwart his plans. Everything was going according to plan, but suddenly the situation changed. Darius was more prepared than they expected, and a fierce firefight ensued. Charlie, realizing that they were ambushed, decided to distract the enemy to give his team a chance to escape. He ordered Marcus and Vincent to take Hannah and the valuable information to safety, while he stayed behind to delay the enemies. Charlie fought with incredible courage and determination. He used all his skills and experience to neutralize as many enemies as possible and give his team time to escape. But the forces were unequal, and in the end, Charlie found himself surrounded. Realizing that his time had come to an end, Charlie made one last gesture. He activated the explosive device he had planted earlier, destroying part of Darius's base and inflicting a serious blow on him. The explosion not only stopped his team's pursuit, but also provided them with enough time to escape. The team was shocked and devastated when they learned of Charlie's death. They lost their leader, the man who led them through the most difficult trials and always found a way out of any situation. But they understood that they must continue his work and protect everything that they created together. Marcus, Vincent, and Hannah vowed to avenge Charlie's death and finish the fight he started. They continued to operate in the world of crime, applying everything that Charlie taught them and following his strategic precepts. Their actions became even more daring and precise, and they were able to inflict final defeat on Darius and his organization. The memory of Charlie lived in their hearts. They continued to move forward, knowing that he would be proud of them. Charlie made his mark on criminal history, becoming a legend, and his legacy lived on through the deeds of his team. Marcus, Vincent, and Hannah, driven by a desire to avenge Charlie, began carefully planning the destruction of Darius and his organization. They knew that this would be the most difficult and dangerous battle, but they were ready to do anything for the sake of their deceased leader. The first step was to gather all available information about Darius and his operation. Hannah, using her hacking skills, infiltrated his organization's security systems to find out his location, schedule, and plans. She also discovered several weak points in his defenses that could be exploited for attack. Marcus and Vincent began preparing for the operation. They established several hidden bases and alternate routes to be able to quickly retreat if necessary. They also began to recruit allies among Charlie's old acquaintances and other criminal groups that had suffered from Darius's actions. They soon learned that Darius was planning a major deal with one of the international crime bosses. This was their opportunity to strike a decisive blow and destroy not only Darius, but also his allies. The team began to develop a detailed plan for the operation. The day of the decisive battle has arrived. Marcus, Vincent, and Hannah entered the area where the deal was to take place. Hannah hacked security systems and interfered with security communications to make it difficult to coordinate them. Marcus and Vincent took up positions, preparing for a surprise attack. When the trade began, the team struck. Marcus and Vincent quickly neutralized the guards using stealth and precision strikes. Hannah coordinated their efforts, providing drone and technical support. They quickly entered the building and began looking for Darius. Suddenly they encountered stiff resistance. It turned out that Darius was expecting an attack and prepared an ambush. A fierce firefight ensued, in which the team showed everything Charlie had taught them. Vincent, using his skills, was able to get to the place where Darius was hiding and set a trap for him. Marcus and Vincent, working together, were able to destroy Darius's key allies and make their way to his personal headquarters. At this point, Hannah discovered that Darius was planning to escape in a helicopter, which was already preparing to take off. The team knew they couldn't let him go. Marcus and Vincent rushed to the helipad. Vincent, using his accuracy, shot down the helicopter, forcing it to make an emergency landing. Darius, realizing that he was trapped, tried to escape, but Marcus overtook him. In a short but fierce battle, Marcus gained the upper hand, delivering a fatal blow. The team completed their mission by destroying Darius and his organization. They returned to their hideout, knowing that they had avenged Charlie's death. Their actions not only brought an end to the enemy, but also strengthened their resolve to continue the fight for justice. Despite their loss, Marcus, Vincent, and Hannah knew that Charlie's memory would live on in their hearts and actions. They continued to operate in the world of crime, but now with a clear goal: to protect the weak and punish those who use force and power for evil. Charles Henderson, nicknamed Old Fox, was known as one of the most dangerous criminals in America. His life was full of adventures and daring operations that turned his name into a legend in the criminal world. Charles began his career as a simple mechanic, but soon became a consummate car thief who always stayed one step ahead of his enemies. Charles was born in Ohio into the family of a mechanic. From an early age, he was surrounded by machines and learned to take them apart and put them back together. But his path changed when he witnessed a car being stolen, and the scene stuck with him. Since then, his life has been devoted to cars, not as a mechanic but as a master theft. His legendary career began with petty thefts, but he soon became known for his daring operations. He used cunning, technical knowledge, and incredible driving skills to pull off thefts that seemed impossible. Charles always remained undetected and undetected, despite the best efforts of the police. Over the years, his reputation only grew. He became the leader of a team that consisted of the best specialists in their fields. Together, they carried out the most daring operations, including robbing rare and expensive cars, hacking security systems, and creating false leads to confuse their enemies. Charles was not only a master thief, but also a strategist. He developed complex plans that included all possible risks and unforeseen circumstances. His ability to predict enemy actions and avoid traps made him unsurpassed in his field. Despite his successes, Charles's life was full of dangers. He was constantly under threat of arrest or attack from competitors. But every time it looked like he was going to be caught, Charles found a way to escape. He was like a shadow, elusive and always one step ahead. But even the most experienced and cunning criminal cannot avoid all dangers. At the age of 71, Charles decided to take part in his final operation to destroy the enemy who was threatening his command. He knew that this would be the most risky and difficult battle, but he was ready to do it for the sake of his people. In that final battle, Charles showed all his skill and courage. He fought like a true warrior, distracting his enemies and giving his team a chance to escape. In the end, he sacrificed himself by activating an explosive device to destroy the enemy base and give his friends an opportunity to escape. Charles Henderson died a hero, leaving behind a legend that will live forever. He was not only one of the most dangerous criminals in America, but also a man who inspired his comrades and instilled fear in his enemies. His name became a symbol of cunning, courage, and unshakable will. Charles was gone, but his spirit lived on in the hearts of those who knew and respected him. Thus ended the story of Charles Henderson, the legendary Old Fox, who will forever be remembered as the greatest master of car theft and one of the most dangerous criminals that ever existed in America. Second story of the criminal. On the outskirts of a small provincial town, where life moved slowly and predictably, a boy named Charles grew up. In his childhood, he did not stand out from the crowd of other children. Perhaps he was a little more secretive and observant. He was only 7 years old when he first encountered the cruelty of the world. My father, a war veteran, was rarely at home, and when he returned, he brought with him the smell of alcohol and aggression. Charles's mother worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. Their house stood on the edge of the forest, where little Charles spent a lot of time alone. He learned to observe animals, to notice the slightest changes in their behavior. This skill, which developed from an innocent childhood hobby, in the future became one of his main trump cards. One day, while returning from school, Charles witnessed a scene that changed him forever. A group of local teenagers, several years older than him, brutally beat a homeless man. Instead of running away or calling for help, Charles stood and watched carefully. Neither the screams nor the blood scared him. He felt something new and strange, a mixture of adrenaline and cold curiosity. This incident was the beginning of a path that turned a quiet boy into one of the most dangerous criminals in America. He realized that force and cruelty could be tools to achieve goals, and began to look for ways to use them in his life. School became an arena of experimentation for him. Charles often got into fights, not because of provocations, but to test his strength and understand how to manage the fear of others. His first serious job was robbing a local store, which he committed at the age of 12. Everything was planned down to the smallest detail. He knew when the owner was leaving, how to get inside, and where to find the money. This success boosted his confidence and launched his criminal career. Over the years, his methods became more and more sophisticated. Charles learned to forge documents, pick locks, and bypass alarms. His name became known in criminal circles, but the police could not trace him for a long time. Charles always acted calmly and prudently, leaving no traces behind him. Thus began the story of Charles, a man who learned the main lesson from childhood. The world is ruled by those who are not afraid to take everything into their own hands, regardless of the means. Teenage years were spent in constant tension and the struggle for survival. He quickly realized that weakness was a luxury he could not afford. His criminal talents developed, and he soon began to attract the attention of local gangs. One of these gangs was led by a certain Victor, an experienced and ruthless criminal who saw potential in Charles. Victor took Charles under his wing, teaching him the ins and outs of the criminal world. Together, they committed robberies, blackmailed small entrepreneurs, and took part in street fights. Victor taught Charles that the main thing in their business is the ability to predict the enemy's actions and be one step ahead. Charles quickly gained experience, and by his 18th birthday, he was already a respected member of the gang. His name evoked fear among the local population and respect among criminals. He was known for his coolness and ability to get out of the most difficult situations. One day, Victor assigned Charles an important task: to eliminate a rival gang leader. This was the first contract killing of his career, and Charles knew that this assignment would test his strength. At night, under cover of darkness, he sneaked into the victim's house. Every step he took was carefully thought out. Every movement was carefully thought out. Charles acted quickly and silently, like a shadow. The murder went flawlessly, and Victor was impressed. From that moment on, Charles became his right hand. But the young criminal had his own ambitions. He did not want to spend his whole life just executing other people's orders. The idea of creating his own gang was already ripening in his head. Victor, feeling threatened by his protégé, attempted to eliminate Charles, but he was one step ahead. Using his intelligence and cunning, Charles set a trap for Victor. As a result of a brutal shootout, Victor was killed, and Charles took his place. Now he was a leader, and his influence extended far beyond the borders of his hometown. He expanded his operations, formed alliances with other criminal groups, and became increasingly powerful. But with each new success, his caution also grew. Charles knew that in this world the only person he could trust was himself. His reputation grew, and soon people started talking about him not only in criminal circles, but also in law enforcement agencies. The police began a hunt for Charles, trying to gather evidence of his crimes. But he was elusive. In every operation, every robbery, every murder, he acted with cold prudence, leaving no traces. Charles became a legend, and his name struck terror into all who heard of his deeds. But he always remembered his childhood, the first steps on the path to the criminal peak. And every time looking in the mirror, he saw not just a dangerous criminal, but a boy who once realized that the world is ruled by those who are not afraid to take everything into their own hands. As his influence and power grew, Charles began to introduce new business methods. He realized that the old methods of criminal activity were outdated and began to use modern technology and communications to achieve his goals. Charles created illegal trading networks, organized cyber attacks on banks and companies, providing himself with unprecedented income. One of the first steps in this direction was the creation of a cover in the form of a legal business. Charles opened several companies that at first glance seemed law-abiding. He hired the best lawyers and accountants to cover up his crimes. These companies served him to launder money and create a network of informants working in different areas of society. Charles skillfully used his men to gather information about his competitors and potential threats. He bribed police officers and officials to turn a blind eye to his activities. Thanks to this, he was always aware of the plans of law enforcement agencies and could quickly respond to any danger. One of Charles's most successful operations was the robbery of a large bank in the city center. He planned it for months, carefully planning every step. On the day of the robbery, his men entered the bank through underground communications, neutralized the guards, and took out all the cash and securities. This robbery became a real sensation, and the police again found themselves powerless in the face of Charles's genius. However, as the scale of his operations increased, so did the attention to his person. The FBI began an investigation aimed at capturing Charles. The best specialists were attracted to the agency, and the hunt began for one of the most dangerous criminals in American history. Charles realized that his position was becoming increasingly vulnerable. He strengthened his security measures, surrounding himself with trusted and trusted people. Its headquarters was equipped with the latest security and monitoring systems. Everyone who came into his circle was thoroughly checked. One day, having received information about an upcoming FBI operation, Charles decided to launch a preemptive strike. He orchestrated a leak of information that led the agents into a trap. Several FBI employees died, and this only strengthened his reputation as an elusive and merciless criminal. Despite all attempts by law enforcement, Charles remained at large. He continued to expand his empire, expanding into new areas and improving his methods. He managed to establish connections with international criminal groups, which opened up new opportunities for him. But in the world of crime, there is no room for weakness and mistakes. Charles knew that his every action had to be flawless, and he continued to play this dangerous game, where the stakes were high, and the price of a mistake was death. His story became more and more complicated, but he always remained one step ahead of his enemies, maintaining the image of a legendary criminal whose name evoked fear and respect. Every year, Charles became more experienced and sophisticated in his actions. His influence spread not only throughout the country, but also beyond its borders. He skillfully used international connections, creating a global network of criminal activities. Charles organized illegal supplies of weapons, drugs, and rare artifacts, which brought him huge profits. One day, during one of his meetings with foreign partners, Charles met Helena, a mysterious woman who was known in criminal circles as the Queen of Shadows. Helena was the head of a powerful criminal organization in Eastern Europe. There was immediate chemistry between them, and they began working together. Their collaboration became fruitful and dangerous for anyone who tried to get in their way. Charles and Helena planned a series of daring operations that led to the seizure of new territories and the elimination of competitors. Together, they developed a strategy to introduce their people into key points of government and business. These actions allowed them to control important financial flows and gain access to information that was inaccessible to ordinary criminal groups. But the success of Charles and Helena did not go unnoticed. The FBI and Interpol joined forces to catch them. A large-scale operation began, the goal of which was to destroy their entire network. The agents managed to strike several key targets, forcing Charles and Helena to go underground. During this difficult period, Charles showed all his cunning and ingenuity. He skillfully used false leads and red herrings to confuse his pursuers. His people carried out disinformation operations, framing other criminal groups and redirecting the attention of law enforcement agencies. However, the pressure continued to mount. Charles's enemies began to unite, seeing him as a common threat. Traitors have emerged within his own organization seeking to take his place. Charles realized that the time had come for drastic changes. He decided to reorganize his empire. Charles created several independent divisions, each of which was responsible for a specific type of activity. This made it possible to reduce risks and complicate the work of law enforcement agencies. He also strengthened security measures by introducing a multi-level protection system. During this period, Charles began to think about his legacy. He understood that sooner or later his path could end, and he wanted to leave behind something more than just fear and destruction. He began investing money in legal businesses and charitable projects to create the appearance of a law-abiding citizen. But his criminal activities continued to be his main passion. He couldn't stop because he knew that only by continuing to play this dangerous game did he feel alive. Charles continued to develop new plans and strategies, always staying one step ahead of his enemies. His name still struck terror in the hearts of those who knew of his deeds. He became a legend, whose story was passed down from mouth to mouth, frightening and delighting at the same time. Charles knew that every day could be his last, but this only spurred him on to move on, stopping at nothing. Over the years, Charles became increasingly elusive. He was several steps ahead of the police, skillfully manipulating information and using his extensive connections. His actions became more and more daring and sophisticated, and soon his name appeared on the lists of the most wanted criminals in the world. Law enforcement agencies in Eastern European countries began to take especially active actions against Charles. The local police, having information about his connections with Helena, Queen of Shadows, focused their efforts on his capture. During one of the operations, they received information about his location. This was supposed to be the culmination of a years-long investigation. Charles learned of the impending raid through his network of informants. He did not hide but decided to use this moment to demonstrate his strength and influence. Instead of fleeing, he organized a large-scale diversionary operation in which dozens of his men participated. On the night of the raid, several robberies, arson, and other crimes occurred in the city, forcing the police to split their forces. When the police raided Charles's supposed hideout, they found only an empty building with signs left on the walls. "You'll never catch me." This operation became a real disgrace for the police and only strengthened Charles's reputation as an elusive genius of the criminal world. The police continued the hunt, but every time they thought they were getting closer to their target, Charles skillfully slipped away, leaving behind only false trails. He used doubles, fake documents, and traveled across several countries, always staying one step ahead of his pursuers. His ability to evade arrest has become the stuff of legend. Helena, seeing how Charles dealt with unprecedented pressure, admired his genius and determination. Their alliance grew stronger, and together they planned new operations that became increasingly large-scale and dangerous. One of these operations was aimed at capturing a large transport hub through which the main flows of illegal goods passed. This would allow Charles and Helena to control an important strategic site and increase their influence in the region. The operation was carefully planned and carried out with the precision of a military operation. The day the police tried to raid Charles again, they encountered a carefully prepared trap. Charles and his men were awaiting their arrival, and as soon as the police arrived at the site, there was an explosion that destroyed the building. None of the militiamen were hurt, but it was a clear signal. Charles would not give up without a fight. After this incident, the police considered him almost elusive. Despite their best efforts, they could not catch Charles. His name became a symbol of cunning and elusiveness, and even the most experienced operatives began to doubt the possibility of his capture. Charles continued his activities, knowing that every day he was free was a small victory over the system. His life remained a constant game of survival, and he enjoyed every moment of it, knowing that his legend would live on even after he was no longer alive. Charles knew that any mistake could cost him his freedom, so he continued to improve his methods. He trained his people, making them real professionals who could perform the most difficult and dangerous tasks. His organization began to resemble a well-oiled mechanism where everyone knew their place and tasks. Charles and Helena decided to expand their activities to a new level. They began to penetrate legal businesses to strengthen their positions and increase profits. They bought shares of large companies, created shell companies, and influenced the market. This allowed them to control not only criminal, but also economic processes. One day, Charles learned about an upcoming international conference, which was to be attended by high-ranking officials and businessmen from different countries. He saw this event as an opportunity for another daring move. Charles and Helena developed a plan whereby they could infiltrate their people into the conference and gain access to important information and make new connections. Preparations for the operation took several months. Forged documents were produced, luxurious suits were rented, and training was conducted on how to behave at such events. On the day of the conference, Charles personally led the operation. His men, pretending to be high-ranking guests, entered the building and began to carry out their tasks. Charles was at a nearby hotel at the time, monitoring the operation using video surveillance and communications. He saw how his people skillfully maneuvered among the guests, making the necessary contacts and collecting important information. The operation went according to plan, but at one point everything went wrong. One of the conference participants, a former intelligence officer, accidentally noticed the forged documents of one of Charles's people. Panic set in and security quickly cordoned off the building. Charles realized that he needed to act quickly. He gave the command to his people to evacuate immediately. Thanks to pre-prepared routes and backup plans, they were able to quickly leave the building and escape. But the incident did not end there. Upon learning of the failure, international intelligence agencies began a new hunt for Charles and his organization. They gathered their best forces to catch the elusive criminal. A real game of cat and mouse began, in which lives and freedom were at stake. Charles realized that his position had become even more dangerous. He strengthened security measures by moving to a new, even more secure shelter. He continued to control his operations, but now every step required even more caution and attention. At the same time, Charles and Helena began to develop new plans to expand their activities. They understood that they had to be one step ahead of their enemies, and to do this, they needed to use all available resources and knowledge. Their union became even stronger, and together they prepared for new challenges, knowing that only strength and determination would allow them to survive in this dangerous world. Charles continued his game, risking everything he had every day. He knew that one day his path might end, but as long as he was free, he had no intention of stopping. His story continued to be written with blood and cunning, and the legend of the elusive criminal grew and multiplied, causing fear and respect. Charles and Helena's new plans included increasing their influence in key areas: politics, international trade, and high technology. They began to actively infiltrate political circles, using corruption and blackmail to obtain the decisions they needed. Influencing politics gave them access to important resources and allowed them to better defend themselves against intelligence agencies. Charles and Helena also decided to invest in startups and innovative companies to gain access to cutting-edge technologies. This gave them the opportunity not only to make money, but also to use these technologies for their own purposes, hacking security systems, controlling information, and creating new ways for money laundering. One of their largest operations involved a cyber attack on a large international bank. Using advanced technology and skills, they were able to penetrate banking systems and transfer significant amounts into their accounts. This robbery attracted the attention of the world's intelligence agencies and became a real challenge for everyone who tried to catch Charles. Meanwhile, international intelligence agencies did not give up trying to catch him. They created a special group of the best specialists, whose goal was only one thing: to neutralize Charles and his organization. Large-scale operations began to collect information, infiltrate agents, and conduct raids. Charles, feeling the pressure mounting, decided to tighten his precautions. He changed several shelters, reduced the number of trusted people, and introduced new security rules. Despite all the efforts of the intelligence services, Charles continued to elude, leaving behind only traces that did not lead to his capture. Helena at this time was engaged in strengthening international relations. She organized a meeting with the leaders of the largest criminal groups to form new alliances and agree on mutual assistance. These connections allowed them to create a global network that operated smoothly and efficiently, leaving no chance for their enemies. One of the most risky operations was an attempt to seize control of an international drug trafficking network. Charles and Helena understood that this would not only bring them huge profits, but also make them even more influential in the criminal world. The operation was carefully planned and carried out with the highest degree of secrecy. Charles personally led the operation using his skills and experience. They infiltrated their people into key locations, intercepted supply chains, and neutralized competitors. This success made them one of the most influential figures in international drug trafficking. But despite all the successes, Charles understood that each new operation increases the risk. He couldn't make the slightest mistake. The enemies became more and more cunning and sophisticated, and the struggle for survival became more and more fierce. His life continued to be a constant game on the edge, where every minute could be the last. Charles knew that his legend would live on even after his death, but he was determined to continue fighting as long as he had the strength and opportunity. Charles's story, as before, was full of danger, intrigue, and a constant struggle for power and survival. Charles and Helena became increasingly inventive in their methods. They understood that in order to continue their successful activities, they needed to not only be able to defend themselves, but also to constantly attack. Their next target was the high technology and artificial intelligence industry. They have invested heavily in a startup that develops artificial intelligence systems for analyzing big data and predicting behavior. Using these technologies, they were able to predict the actions of their enemies and find weaknesses in the security systems of large corporations and government agencies. One of their most ambitious operations was to penetrate the national security system of one of the world's leading powers. This gave them access to confidential information, which they used to blackmail and manipulate politicians and high-ranking officials. With their help, Charles and Helena achieved decisions that were beneficial to themselves and strengthened their influence in the international arena. Meanwhile, intelligence agencies continued to hunt for Charles. They had the best analysts and operatives at their disposal, but every time it seemed that they were getting closer to their goal, Charles managed to slip away. He used false trails, fake identities, and complex movement patterns to stay out of reach. One day, the intelligence services decided to take extreme measures. They inserted their agent into one of Charles's closest groups. The agent's name was Mark, and he was an experienced operative capable of infiltrating the most secretive organizations. Mark managed to earn trust and gradually climbed the career ladder in Charles's criminal empire. Mark carefully collected information, passing it on to his superiors. However, Charles was not so simple. He suspected that there might be a traitor in his circle and began his own investigation. Using his skills and technology, he closely monitored all of his people, analyzing their behavior and actions. Charles's suspicions were confirmed when he discovered hidden data transmissions coming from Mark. He decided to use this situation to his advantage. Instead of eliminating the agent, Charles began to provide him with false information, directing the intelligence services in the wrong direction. This game of double agent continued for several months. Charles used it to carry out several important operations that diverted the attention of the intelligence services and allowed him to strengthen his position. But he understood that this was a temporary measure, and sooner or later the intelligence services would discover the deception. Deciding to launch a preemptive strike, Charles and Helena planned a large-scale operation to undermine confidence in the intelligence services. They launched a series of attacks on key targets that appeared to be the work of rival criminal gangs. These attacks caused chaos and mistrust within the intelligence services themselves, which began to accuse each other of information leaks and betrayal. This chaos gave Charles the time he needed to prepare his next move. He decided to go into the shadows and temporarily stop his active work in order to give the intelligence services a false sense of victory. But in fact, he was only preparing for a new, even more ambitious plan, which was supposed to change the balance of power in the world of crime. Charles and Helena knew their story was far from over. They continued to stay one step ahead of their enemies, planning new operations and increasing their influence. Their legend continued to live on, and each new day was another challenge that they accepted with composure and determination. Charles and Helena were immersed in preparing their next big plan, which would take their organization to the next level. They decided to focus on developing and implementing biometric technologies for access control and identification, which would allow them to make their operations even more secure and harder to track. They created a shell company specializing in innovative security technologies. This company quickly gained recognition in the market, attracting the attention of large corporations and government agencies. Using fake identities and carefully planned deals, Charles and Helena implanted their biometric systems in key facilities around the world. These systems were designed to have hidden back doors through which Charles and Helena could gain access to protected objects and information. This gave them the opportunity to control financial flows, movements, and important data, while remaining in the shadows and without arousing suspicion. Meanwhile, the intelligence services continued to intensively search for traces of Charles. They joined forces with international partners, creating interagency teams and conducting joint operations. But every time they thought they were close to their goal, Charles managed to disappear, leaving behind only scraps of false information. Elena, using her connections in Eastern Europe, was able to establish contact with a group of scientists working on new technologies in the field of quantum computing. These technologies could significantly enhance their hacking and information security capabilities. They decided to invest in this project, which allowed them to gain access to advanced developments and use them for their own purposes. One of the most ambitious operations of Charles and Helena was associated with a major international summit at which issues of global security and economics were to be discussed. They decided to use this summit to conduct a large-scale operation to hack security systems and collect confidential information. Preparations for this operation lasted several months. Complex schemes for infiltration and diversionary maneuvers were developed. Charles and Elena personally coordinated all stages to ensure maximum efficiency and minimal risks. On the day of the summit, their people, disguised as maintenance personnel and technical specialists, entered the building and began carrying out their tasks. Using biometric systems and quantum computers, they were able to access secure databases, collecting information about the plans and strategies of the world's leading powers. This information gave them not only an economic and political advantage, but also the ability to blackmail and manipulate key figures. However, the special services were not asleep either. Thanks to an infiltrated agent, they received information about the impending operation and decided to use this as an opportunity to capture Charles. In the midst of the summit, a large-scale operation began to capture his people, but Charles, having foreseen such an outcome, prepared a retreat plan in advance. At the moment when the Secret Services burst into the building, Charles activated the disinformation system, which allowed his people to escape and destroy all traces of their presence. The intelligence operation ended in failure, and they again found themselves powerless in the face of Charles's genius. This success only strengthened the reputation of Charles and Helena. Their names became legends in the criminal world, and their influence continued to grow. They understood that every new operation was a challenge and a risk, but it was these challenges that made their life so exciting and full of adrenaline. Charles continued his game, constantly on the edge and ready for new challenges. His story was far from over, and he knew that many more dangerous and exciting adventures awaited him. Charles and Helena plunged deeper and deeper into their ambitious plans. They understood that technology and information are the key to power and continued to develop their projects in this area. One of these projects was related to the development of a network of satellites that would allow them to control communications and monitor any objects in real time. To implement this idea, they teamed up with several scientists and engineers who had experience in the space industry. Several covert companies were created that began developing and launching satellites. This project required significant investment and careful preparation, but Charles and Helena were ready for it. Within a few years, their satellites began to enter orbit, creating a global surveillance and communications network. This gave them the ability to control the movement of people and goods, intercept secret messages, and gain access to important information. This system became the basis of their new strategy, allowing them to stay one step ahead of their enemies. Meanwhile, intelligence agencies continued their attempts to catch Charles. They intensified surveillance of his possible allies and partners, trying to find even the slightest trace that could lead to his capture. But Charles, knowing about these actions, constantly changed his methods and schemes without giving them a chance. One day, Charles and Helena received information about a major intelligence operation directed against one of their key bases. They decided to use this situation to their advantage. Instead of simply hiding, they devised a plan to create misinformation and diversion. At the time of the intelligence service's attack, their men were ready and launched a counterattack using pre-prepared traps and false leads. This operation not only avoided capture, but also dealt a serious blow to the intelligence services. The morale of their employees was undermined, and the internal atmosphere of mistrust and suspicion increased. Charles and Helena continued to gain time, strengthening their positions and developing new projects. During this period, they decided to expand their influence in the field of medicine. Charles and Helena invested in developments in genetic engineering and biotechnology. They saw this not only as a commercial benefit, but also as an opportunity to gain control over people's health and lives. Their laboratories worked to create new drugs, as well as technologies that could be used to their advantage. One of these technologies was the development of nanorobots capable of performing medical procedures inside the human body. These developments could be used both to treat diseases and for more secretive and dangerous purposes. Charles and Helena understood that control of such technology would give them a huge advantage. However, their activities did not go unnoticed. A new leader has emerged in the ranks of the intelligence services, a determined and intelligent agent named Alexei. He was ready to go to any lengths to catch Charles. Alexei began his hunt, studying every detail and analyzing every action of Charles and Helena. He was persistent and purposeful, and his methods became increasingly sophisticated. Alexei acted methodically and flawlessly. He knew that capturing Charles would require patience and cunning. His people penetrated deeper into the networks of companies associated with Charles's activities and gradually collected more and more incriminating information. Alexei understood that for a successful operation, he needed accurate data and carefully planned actions. Meanwhile, Charles and Helena continued to expand their capabilities. Their satellite network, designed for control and surveillance, has borne fruit. They could track the movements of key figures in the government and intelligence agencies, which gave them an advantage in any situation. This information allowed them to plan their actions with incredible precision. However, Alexei was also not a failure. He managed to infiltrate one of Charles's most secure networks, gaining access to their satellite data. This allowed him not only to monitor Charles's actions, but also to organize his own operation to neutralize his network. Alexei understood that he couldn't take Charles with a direct attack. He needed to use his own methods, be one step ahead, and play a subtle game. In one of the laboratories of Charles and Helena, where nanorobots were being developed, Alexei introduced his agent. This agent managed to replace part of the development so that nanorobots could not only treat, but also destroy certain targets. Alexei hoped to use this technology against Charles, but did it so that no one would suspect his interference. Charles, always on guard, began to suspect that there was a traitor in his organizations. He strengthened internal security, conducting thorough checks and eliminating any suspicion. However, Alexei was more cunning. He left false traces, diverting suspicions. One day, having received information about an impending intelligence operation, Charles decided to launch a preemptive strike. He organized a series of attacks on objects related to Alexei's activities. These attacks were carefully planned and executed with surgical precision. But Alexei was ready for this too. He used this moment to infiltrate even more of his agents into Charles's ranks. Helena, observing the development of events, suggested that Charles temporarily go into the shadows and reconsider his strategies. They decided to focus on strengthening their position and developing new technologies that could give them even more control. At this time, Alexei continued his operations, preparing the decisive blow. Charles and Helena knew that their enemy was dangerous, but they were not going to give up. They began developing a new plan that would take them to the next level. Their idea was to create an autonomous control system that could function without human intervention. This system could monitor all their operations and ensure maximum security. Alexei, feeling that the moment of truth was approaching, decided to speed up his actions. He assembled a team of the best specialists to deal a decisive blow to Charles's network. During one of the operations, he managed to capture important documents that could lead to the exposure of all the plans of Charles and Helena. However, Charles, always anticipating the moves of his enemies, was ready for this. He organized a diversionary operation that misled the intelligence services and allowed him to escape. This game continued, and each time Charles remained one step ahead. Their story continued, full of intrigue, danger, and constant struggle for survival. Charles and Helena knew that their journey was not over yet, and they were ready for new challenges, confident in their ability to overcome any obstacles. The world they lived in required constant movement forward, and they accepted this challenge with determination and composure. Alexei managed to introduce his people into one of the companies associated with Charles's projects. He began to collect information that could lead to a clue to their plans. Charles, sensing a threat, increased security measures and began counterintelligence activities. A new phase of the struggle began, where each side tried to outwit the other. Charles and Helena understood that their opponent was dangerous, but they were not going to give up. Their story continued to evolve, full of danger and intrigue. They were ready for new challenges and confident that their intelligence and determination would help them survive in this cruel world where every day was a struggle for power and survival. Every day the pressure on Charles and Helena increased. Alexei continued his operations, hoping that luck would eventually turn his way. He assembled a team of the best analysts and hackers to uncover all the secret passages and secluded places where Charles and his organization were hiding. Charles, realizing the seriousness of the situation, decided to take drastic measures. He gathered all his closest associates and proposed to them a plan that could radically change the course of their struggle. This plan consisted of creating a new control center located in a highly secret location, inaccessible to intelligence agencies. This center would be the brains of their operation, controlled by the artificial intelligence they had been developing over the past few years. This center was built in an abandoned underground base left over from the Cold War. Charles and Helena personally supervised all stages of construction, ensuring maximum secrecy and protection. The latest technology was installed inside the base, allowing it to manage operations around the world without being noticed. Meanwhile, Alexei managed to obtain information that Charles and Helena were preparing something big. He intensified his efforts to find their new hideout. With the help of his agents, he began to look for any traces that could lead to this center. Charles and Helena, anticipating this move, decided to carry out a diversionary operation. They launched a series of hoax operations around the world to confuse intelligence agencies and give them false targets. At this time, their center was completely ready for work. The artificial intelligence they called Nexus was launched and began its work of coordinating all the activities of their organization. Nexus has proven to be incredibly effective. He analyzed huge amounts of data, predicted the actions of enemies, and developed strategies that were inaccessible even to Charles himself. This gave them a huge advantage, and their operations became even more successful and discreet. But Alexei did not give up. He felt that he was on the verge of solving a mystery. During one of the operations, he managed to capture one of Charles's people who knew about the existence of the Nexus. Under pressure, the agent revealed the location of the underground base. Alexei immediately organized a large-scale operation to capture the base. At this time, Charles and Helena, having learned about the impending threat, decided to use their last trump card. They prepared the base to self-destruct in order to prevent the enemy from capturing the Nexus and all their developments. When the intelligence services burst into the base, Charles and Helena were already ready. At the last moment, they activated the self-destruct system and managed to escape through a secret tunnel. The base exploded, destroying all traces of their activities and leaving Alexei with nothing. But this was not the end. Charles and Helena understood that the struggle continued. They decided to start over from scratch, but now with even greater caution and secrecy. Their story is not over, and they are ready for new challenges, knowing that every day they are free is a small victory in this endless game. Alexei, realizing that they had slipped away again, did not give up. He knew that this battle was far from over and continued his hunt, hoping that one day luck would smile on him. The game continued, and the stakes became higher, but both Charles and Alexei were ready for this dangerous and exciting battle. Charles and Helena, realizing that their previous methods had become too risky, decided to make a move that could radically change their situation. They decided to focus on creating a network of influence that permeated all spheres of society, from politics to finance and media. They knew that their strength now lay not only in stealth, but also in control of key resources and people. To do this, they began work with recruiting new talent and creating a training system. They attracted young and promising specialists from various fields, providing them with unique opportunities for development. These people became their agents of influence, working in key positions in government, corporations, and the media. Thus, Charles and Helena created an invisible empire, where each figure was connected to them by invisible threads. Helena continued to develop her international connections, entering into new alliances and agreements with criminal groups and political leaders. She created a support network that allowed them to operate on a global level without attracting too much attention to themselves. One of Charles's main goals was to create a fund that would invest in promising startups and innovative projects. This fund, officially registered and legally operating, became a cover for their operations. With its help, they could not only earn money, but also introduce their technologies and developments into various companies, gaining access to important information and resources. Meanwhile, Alexei, without giving up his attempts to catch Charles, began to study his new steps. He realized that Charles had changed tactics and was now acting more sophisticated. Alexei decided to use his experience and knowledge to penetrate this new network of influence. He began by creating a team of analysts who could identify patterns and connections between various figures and events. Gradually, they began to unravel how Charles and Helena were building their empire. Alexei decided to use this information to hit the most vulnerable parts of their network. Charles, having foreseen such a move, strengthened security measures and began to act even more secretly. He constantly changed his routes, used dummies, and created false leads, but Alexei was inexorable. He placed his agents in several key companies associated with Charles's foundation and began collecting data. Soon, Alexei realized that he had a real opportunity to strike. He organized a series of raids and arrests aimed at undermining Charles's network of influence. These actions created temporary chaos, but Charles and Helena, thanks to their preparedness and foresight, quickly adapted to the new situation. Charles decided to strike back. He organized a large-scale operation aimed at disinformation and undermining the reputation of Alexei and his team. With the help of his agents of influence, he spread false information that discredited the actions of the intelligence services and sowed distrust among their leadership. This move allowed Charles and Helena to regain their positions and strengthen their network of influence. They continued their game, stopping at nothing. Each new challenge made them stronger and smarter, helping them stay one step ahead of their enemies. Alexei, despite temporary setbacks, did not lose his determination. He understood that his opponents were incredibly smart and inventive, but this only spurred him on to new actions. He continued his hunt, knowing that the fight for justice and order required constant readiness and determination. The story of Charles and Helena continued, full of dangers, intrigues, and unexpected twists. They knew that their journey was not yet complete, and they were ready for new challenges, confident in their ability to overcome any obstacles. The world they lived in required constant movement forward, and they accepted this challenge with determination and composure. Charles and Helena understood that every mistake they made could be fatal. They have strengthened their security measures by implementing the latest developments in cyber defense and physical security. They created backup databases and duplication systems to protect their information from possible attacks. Alexei, despite temporary setbacks, continued his hunt. He developed a new plan that would undermine Charles's credibility within his own organization. Alexei began to spread rumors and fake evidence hinting at betrayal on the part of Charles's closest associates. This tactic sowed distrust and suspicion among his men. At this time, Charles and Helena decided to use one of their old tactics: disinformation. They began to spread false information about their plans and actions in order to confuse the intelligence agencies. This operation was carefully thought out and planned so that the enemies could not distinguish truth from lies. One day, Charles received information about an upcoming intelligence operation aimed at capturing him. Alexei, using information received from Victor, planned a large-scale attack on one of Charles's key hideouts. This operation was to be decisive, but Charles was ready for it. He developed a plan to intercept the attack and use it to his advantage. Charles decided to set up a trap that would allow him to neutralize most of the enemy forces and inflict serious damage on them. On the day of the operation, his men were ready. When security forces stormed the building, they faced a brutal counterattack. Charles used his communications and surveillance network to coordinate the actions of his men. Thanks to this, he managed not only to repel the attack, but also to capture several intelligence agents. These agents became a valuable source of information that Charles used to further his actions. Helena, observing the success of the operation, proposed a retaliatory strike. They decided to carry out a series of attacks on targets associated with the intelligence services in order to divert attention from their main goals and create chaos in the ranks of their enemies. These attacks were carried out with precision and composure, allowing them to achieve significant successes. Alexei, realizing that his plan had failed, decided to change tactics. He began working with international partners to organize a larger operation against Charles. Joint groups were created, including the best cybersecurity specialists and analysts from different countries. Charles, anticipating this move, strengthened his international connections and strengthened alliances with other criminal groups. He knew that only well-coordinated actions could help them survive in this cruel game. He also began working on new projects that could give them even more advantages. One such initiative was the development of an artificial intelligence system capable of analyzing and predicting the actions of enemies. This project was carried out in strict secrecy, and its success would be an important step in the fight for survival. Nexus continued to evolve, becoming an increasingly powerful and effective tool. Meanwhile, Alexei prepared a new plan, which was supposed to be a decisive blow. He launched a cyber attack on Charles's key servers, hoping to gain access to their network and paralyze their activities. However, Charles was ready for this. Its security systems, built on the basis of artificial intelligence, repelled the attack and neutralized the threat. Charles and Helena continued to develop their empire, strengthening it and introducing new technologies. They knew that only innovation and constant movement forward would help them survive and maintain their influence. At the same time, they understood that their enemies were also not standing still and were developing new methods of struggle. One day, Charles and Helena received information about a major international conference on cybersecurity, which was supposed to bring together leading experts from different countries. They decided to use this conference for their own purposes, not only to gain access to new developments and technologies, but also to introduce their agents into the circles of high-ranking participants. Preparations for the operation began several months before the conference. Forged documents were produced, and a cover was created for their agents, who were supposed to work under the guise of representatives of legitimate companies. Charles and Helena personally coordinated all stages of preparation to ensure maximum safety and efficiency of the operation. On the day of the conference, their agents, carefully prepared and trained, began to carry out their tasks. They made acquaintances, collected information, and introduced special devices to intercept data. This operation was planned with the precision of a military mission, and Charles was confident of its success. However, Alexei, having learned about Charles's plans, decided to strike. He also infiltrated the conference, hoping to identify and capture Charles's men. Alexei understood that this was his chance to catch Charles and his people in the act. In the midst of the conference, a fierce battle broke out between Alexei's agents and Charles's men. It was a battle of technology and intelligence, where every step was thought out and verified. Charles, watching from his hideout, used the nexus to coordinate efforts and ensure the safety of his men. Elena, being on the spot, personally led the operation, ensuring prompt decision-making and real-time adjustments to the plan. Their agents, using advanced technology and the ability to disguise themselves, managed to bypass most of the traps and deftly avoided capture. Alexei, seeing that his plan was not working, decided to use extreme measures. He activated a cyber attack on the conference's security systems, hoping to create chaos and use it to his advantage. But Nexus, anticipating this move, repelled the attack and seized control of the systems. As a result, instead of catching Charles's people, the intelligence services found themselves trapped. Their networks were hacked, and information about their plans and operations fell into the hands of Charles. This was a huge success for him and his team, and they used the findings to further strengthen their position. Charles and Helena decided not to stop there. They understood that every success made them more vulnerable to new attacks. They began to develop new strategies and plans that were supposed to make them even more elusive and dangerous. They began to create a network of secret shelters and bases located in different countries. These bases were equipped with the latest technology and protected from all known threats. Charles and Helena personally inspected each base, ensuring it was prepared for any eventuality. Meanwhile, Alexei, realizing that his plan had failed, did not give up. He began to develop new tactics, which were to become even more cunning and insidious. He brought in the best experts in psychology and behavioral analysis to better understand Charles's actions and motives. Charles and Helena, feeling the growing pressure, did not relax. They continued to work on their projects, developing new technologies and strengthening ties with their allies. Their story continued, full of intrigue, danger, and unexpected turns. They knew that new challenges lay ahead, and they were ready to face them with determination and composure. Helena has always been Charles's faithful and reliable partner. Her ability to plan and coordinate actions made her indispensable in their dangerous game. However, Despite all the precautions, the enemies were still able to find a way to strike. One day, Charles and Helena received information about a meeting with an important ally in one of the European capitals. This meeting was supposed to strengthen their position and open up new opportunities for expanding their empire. Preparations for the meeting were thorough and all safety measures were taken. Meanwhile, Alexei and his team, having received information about the plans of Charles and Helena, developed a complex plan to capture them. Alexei decided to take advantage of the moment when Elena would be most vulnerable. During her trip to the meeting, Elena, confident in her safety, went to the meeting with a small escort. She used fake documents and a carefully planned route to avoid the attention of her enemies. But Alexei was ready for this. His agents infiltrated the city's security system and gained access to surveillance cameras, allowing them to track Elena's movements. When Elena arrived at the meeting place, everything seemed calm. But suddenly, as she was getting out of the car, a group of mercenaries attacked her. It was a lightning-fast operation, planned with maximum precision. Elena was left no chance of salvation. She was killed on the spot. Charles, upon learning of the tragedy, was shocked. The loss of Elena was a huge blow for him. She was not only his partner but also a close friend. Charles felt like his world had collapsed, but he knew he couldn't afford to show weakness. His grief quickly turned to determination. He vowed to find and punish those behind the attack. Using everything, his resources and connections, Charles began a large-scale investigation to identify those responsible. He acted coldly and ruthlessly, eliminating everyone who was involved in Elena's death. Alexei, realizing that Charles would not stop, strengthened security measures. But Charles, driven by anger and a desire for revenge, was ready to do anything to achieve his goal. He began to attack intelligence facilities, carrying out sabotage and attacks that created chaos and destruction. Meanwhile, Charles continued to develop his projects, realizing that only a powerful and well-organized structure could ensure his victory. He attracted new people who were willing to work for him, despite the danger. His empire continued to grow, and every day brought new opportunities and threats. The memory of Helen always remained with Charles. Her death became an incentive for him to continue the fight and strengthen his empire. He knew that every day was a new battle, and he was ready to take on the challenge with determination and composure. Their story continued, and Charles was determined to complete what he started, despite all the obstacles and dangers. Charles, shocked by Helen's death, decided to personally find out who was behind her murder. His grief turned to cold determination, and he mobilized all his resources to launch a large-scale investigation. Every agent, every connection, and every available resource was focused on finding answers. The first task was to gather information about the mercenaries who attacked Helena. Charles knew that such operations required significant resources and a carefully thought-out plan, so he focused on finding leads in criminal circles and among famous mercenaries. Charles used his surveillance and communications network to track the mercenaries' movements on the day of the assassination. His team carefully checked all the surveillance cameras in the area of the attack, trying to find footage that could shed light on the identities of the attackers. After several days of analyzing the video footage, they discovered key clues. The recordings showed that the mercenaries used professional camouflage techniques, but one of them made the mistake of removing his mask for a few seconds. This moment was enough to identify one of the attackers. Charles ordered his men to track this mercenary, which led them to one of the European criminal groups known for their contract killings. The leader of this group turned out to be Carl Vitali, a ruthless criminal specializing in contract killings. Charles decided to set a trap for Vitali by organizing a false deal. During this operation, Charles's men captured Vitali and took him to one of the secret hideouts. In a dark room, lit only by one lamp, Vitali sat tied up on a chair. Charles, watching him, knew that he could not afford to be soft. Charles began the interrogation, using all his experience and skill. Under pressure, Vitali admitted that the order to kill Elena came from Alexei. Alexei knew about the planned meeting with his ally and used this opportunity to strike. Alexei's name did not come as a surprise to Charles. He understood that Alexei would stop at nothing to catch him. Now that he knew the truth, Charles could devise a plan for revenge. He continued the interrogation to find out all the details of the operation, including the organization of the attack, the resources involved, and the individuals involved. Every detail was important to Charles so that he could prepare his counterattack. After the interrogation was completed, Charles released Vitali, warning him of the consequences of betrayal. Now, with the full picture, Charles began to develop a plan for revenge. He decided to strike at Alexei himself, depriving him of support and destroying his operations. Charles knew that this fight would be difficult and dangerous, but he was willing to risk everything to avenge Helena. He began to coordinate his forces, preparing for the decisive battle. Every new information and every new ally brought him closer to his goal. Charles couldn't afford to lose. His story continued, and he was determined to complete what he started despite all the obstacles and dangers. Charles, completely focused on his mission, began to build a complex network of operations aimed at undermining Alexei's position. He carefully analyzed every detail, planning his moves with the precision of a chess grandmaster. His men operated throughout the world, infiltrating key locations to gather information and prepare the way for the main attack. Charles's first targets were Alexei's closest allies. Charles decided to use blackmail and bribery methods to weaken their loyalty and create internal discord. He began with small but significant operations, which gradually eroded Alexei's support and created distrust within his organization. Charles also intensified his cyber attacks on the communications and security systems of the intelligence agencies where Alexei worked. Using his Nexus artificial intelligence, he infiltrated secure networks, collecting valuable data and destroying critical enemy assets. These attacks created chaos and disorganization, giving Charles additional time to prepare for the decisive blow. At the same time, Charles continued to develop his international connections. He made several key agreements with criminal groups and politicians, securing himself support and resources for the upcoming battle. His new allies provided him with information about the movements of Alexei and his team, which allowed Charles to act even more accurately. Meanwhile, Alexei, realizing that Charles was beginning to press him from different sides, began to strengthen security measures. He created several new teams specializing in counterintelligence and hunting down Charles's agents. However, Charles's actions were so sophisticated and unexpected that Alexei barely had time to react to new threats. Charles understood that for final victory, he needed not only to weaken Alexei, but also to deliver a decisive blow. He decided to organize a large-scale operation that was supposed to take Alexei out of the game. To do this, he developed a complex plan, including several red herrings and false leads. Charles began by organizing a series of false operations that diverted the attention of Alexei and his team. While they were busy trying to expose these operations, Charles prepared the main attack. He chose the moment when Alexei was most vulnerable, during one of his secret meetings with informants. Charles used all his resources and capabilities to prepare this operation. His men infiltrated the secure area where the meeting was to take place and installed hidden cameras and microphones. When Alexei and his men arrived, Charles was ready. In the midst of the meeting, the attack began. Charles's men acted with lightning speed and ruthlessness. Within a few minutes, most of Alexei's guards were neutralized. Alexei, realizing that he had fallen into a trap, tried to hide, but Charles's people were everywhere. Charles, watching the operation through cameras, followed every move. Ultimately, Alexei was captured and taken to one of Charles's secret hideouts. This was the moment Charles had been waiting for since the day Helena died. Now that his main enemy was in his hands, Charles knew that his journey was not yet completed. He was ready to use all the information he received to finally destroy Alexei's organization and ensure the safety of his empire. With the death of Alexei, Charles felt relief, but knew that the victory was not yet final. Despite significant losses, Alexei's organization could try to take revenge or reform under a new leader. Charles decided to continue his campaign to destroy the remnants of Alexei's network. Charles focused his efforts on strengthening his position and preventing possible threats. He continued to use the Nexus to analyze data and predict enemy actions. With his help, Charles was able to identify and eliminate several hidden cells associated with Alexei's organization. One of the main tasks was to expose traitors and spies who might remain in his own ranks. Charles carried out a massive purge, testing the loyalty of every agent. Thanks to this, he managed to avoid several sabotage attempts and ensure the safety of his empire. Meanwhile, Charles continued to develop his projects. It has invested heavily in developing new technologies and expanding its international connections. His influence grew, and he became one of the most powerful and elusive criminal leaders in the world. However, despite the successes, Charles understood that he could not relax. He always remained on guard and prepared for possible attacks. His men continued to work around the clock to ensure security and control of key facilities. Several months passed, and Charles was finally able to return to his long-term plans. He began developing new projects in the field of biotechnology and artificial intelligence, seeking to use these advances to strengthen his empire. His goal was not only to maintain his influence, but also to create a basis for long-term control and protection. Charles also began working actively to improve his relations with governments and international organizations. He used his resources and influence to secure lucrative deals and secure high-level support. This allowed him to further strengthen his position and reduce the threat from law enforcement agencies. Despite his apparent calm, Charles was always ready for new challenges. He knew that in this world one could not be completely sure of one's safety, and he continued to develop his projects and strengthen his empire. His story continued, full of intrigue, danger, and unexpected twists. Years passed, and Charles's name became a legend in the criminal world. His achievements and ability to evade justice were feared and respected. He became a symbol of strength and cunning, and many tried to imitate him, but none could match his genius. After destroying Alexei's organization and strengthening his position, Charles decided to carry out another daring operation to show that he was still in the game and was not going to stop. This time, his target was a bank in Texas, one of the largest and most secure in the region. Charles knew that the success of this operation would not only bring him significant profits, but also strengthen his reputation as the elusive mastermind of the criminal world. Charles began by choosing a target. He conducted a thorough analysis of several banks in Texas, assessing their security systems, location, and profit potential. Ultimately, his choice fell on the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. This bank kept huge reserves of cash and securities, and its security systems were considered one of the most reliable in the country. Planning for the operation began with a detailed study of all aspects of the bank's security. Charles used his extensive connections to gain access to information about CCTV systems, security protocols, and patrol routes. He also hired a team of hacking and security experts to help him develop an infiltration plan. The first step was to introduce our people into the bank. Charles set up shell companies that contracted to provide services to the bank, from maintenance to security. These front workers began gathering information from the inside, analyzing weaknesses and developing infiltration strategies. At the same time, Charles developed diversionary maneuvers to divert the attention of the police and intelligence agencies. He planned a series of petty robberies and sabotages throughout the city to create chaos and disorganization. These actions were intended to provide additional time and reduce the risk of detection of the underlying operation. Charles also created several false leads that were supposed to lead the investigation astray. He framed several criminal gangs to appear as prime suspects in a series of robberies. This allowed him to maintain his anonymity and reduce the risk of exposure. When all preparations were completed, Charles assembled his team and gave detailed instructions. Each participant in the operation knew his role and tasks. They trained in a specially prepared area that simulated the inside of a bank to be prepared for any situation. The day of the robbery was carefully chosen. It was a Friday evening when there were minimal employees at the bank, and the police's attention was scattered due to previous sabotage. Charles and his team arrived at the site disguised as maintenance workers, using fake documents and passes. Having got inside, they quickly neutralized the security and turned off the video surveillance systems. Then, using their skills and equipment, they broke into the safes and began removing money and securities. The operation was carried out with maximum speed and precision to minimize time spent at the crime scene. When the operation was completed, Charles and his team left the bank as quietly as they had arrived. They used several pre-prepared retreat routes to avoid pursuit. All traces were carefully disguised, and false traces led the police astray. The robbery of the Federal Reserve Bank in Dallas was one of Charles's most daring and successful operations. He not only made huge profits, but also strengthened his reputation as an elusive and brilliant criminal. However, Charles knew that every success made him a target for new enemies, and he continued to remain on guard, preparing for new challenges and trials. Despite the careful planning and successful completion of the robbery, Charles made one serious mistake that could cost him his freedom and his life. After his team left the bank, he decided to take with him not only money and securities, but also several electronic devices that could contain important information. This decision turned out to be fatal. These devices, including laptops and external hard drives, contain not only data about the bank, but also information about its own transactions and relationships. In a hurry and under time pressure, Charles did not have time to thoroughly check and remove all incriminating materials. This became the very trail that could lead the intelligence services to his empire. After the robbery, when Charles was analyzing the loot, he realized his mistake. One of the laptops turned out to be protected with complex passwords and encryption systems, which raised suspicions. Charles tried to open it to find out what data was stored on it, but instead activated the built-in security systems, which began automatically transmitting signals to the bank's security servers. Charles immediately tried to isolate the device and prevent information leakage, but it was too late. Signals have already begun to arrive on the servers, and the bank and then the intelligence services received a warning about the hack. They began analyzing the data and soon discovered incriminating information. Intelligence agencies quickly responded by launching an investigation. They noticed strange movements of funds and anomalous network activity that pointed to a connection between the robbery and Charles's organization. Analysts began collecting all available data, trying to find even the slightest trace that could lead them to the criminal. Meanwhile, Charles realized that he had made a serious mistake and began to prepare for a counterattack. He knew that the intelligence services could get on his trail at any moment and began to develop a plan to destroy all possible evidence. He ordered his men to destroy all documents and data that could compromise him and his organization. However, the trail had already been left, and the intelligence services began to approach. Charles decided to use one of his old tactics, disinformation. He began to spread false leads that led the investigation away from his real operations. At the same time, He organized several diversionary maneuvers to slow down their progress. But the security services were persistent. They increased the pressure and began hunting Charles's men. Several of his closest associates were detained and, under threat of prison terms, began to testify. Charles knew that the circle was closing and he needed to act quickly. At this critical moment, Charles decided to risk everything to save his empire. He organized a daring operation to destroy the servers on which information about his actions was stored. This operation was extremely dangerous and required maximum precision and coordination. Charles and his team entered the data center where the servers were located and planted explosive devices. The operation was successful and all data was destroyed. This gave Charles time to regroup and tighten security measures. However, the security services did not give up. They continued the hunt, realizing that it was a matter of time to catch Charles. Charles knew that his life and his empire were hanging by a thread, but he was not going to give up. He continued to develop new strategies and plans, preparing for new challenges and dangers. Charles's story continued, full of intrigue, danger, and unexpected twists. He was ready for any battle, knowing that every new day is a new challenge that he must accept with determination and composure. Charles remained elusive for a long time, but his last mistake was the stone that launched the avalanche. After destroying the servers and temporarily eluding intelligence agencies, Charles decided that he needed to quiet down and reconsider his actions. However, despite all his precautions, he was unable to completely erase the traces left by his operations. The intelligence services, having lost part of the data due to the explosion, did not give up. They began methodically collecting information about those who might be associated with Charles. One of these people turned out to be an old acquaintance of Charles named Victor, who once worked for him, but then went into the shadows. The intelligence services found Victor and, after much interrogation and persuasion, obtained key information from him. Victor knew enough about Charles's methods and connections to help the intelligence services create an accurate profile of his activities. He pointed out several key points where Charles could hide and conduct his operations. In exchange for protection and a reduced prison sentence, Victor agreed to work with the authorities. The intelligence services used the information received to organize a large-scale operation to capture Charles. They started by tracking his financial flows and contacts, hoping to find a weak link. Gradually, the circle narrowed, and agents were able to identify several places that Charles could use as hideouts. One of these points turned out to be a country house, which Charles used for meetings and planning operations. This place was located in a remote area, and access to it was strictly limited. The intelligence services decided to use the element of surprise and carefully planned the operation. On the night of the siege, a group of special forces surrounded the house. They acted silently so as not to give away their presence ahead of time. When everything was ready, the team rushed inside. Charles and his men were taken by surprise. Charles tried to escape through a secret exit, but the special forces already knew about his existence and blocked it. Charles, realizing that he had fallen into a trap, made a last attempt at resistance. But the forces were unequal. He was captured and taken under heavy guard to the headquarters of the special services. A long interrogation and trial awaited him there. Intelligence agencies carefully documented all the evidence collected against Charles. He was charged with multiple counts, including robbery, murder, and organizing a criminal group. The trial was long and complex, but Charles was ultimately found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. The operation was a huge success for the intelligence services, and Charles's name became a symbol that even the most elusive criminals would eventually be caught. Despite all his skills and cunning, Charles made one mistake that became his downfall. His story, full of intrigue, danger, and unexpected turns, has come to an end, leaving behind a trail of destruction and betrayal. After Charles's capture and conviction, the criminal world breathed a sigh of relief, but also remained wary. His name became a legend, and many imitators tried to take his place. However, no one could match Charles's genius and audacity. Charles was placed in one of the most secure prisons in the country. Behind him were years filled with intrigue, danger, and incredible operations. He knew he would have a lot of time to think in prison. Despite his imprisonment, Charles did not lose spirit. He began writing memoirs describing his adventures and strategies. His records have become a valuable source for criminologists and intelligence agencies trying to understand and predict the actions of criminals like him. Meanwhile, the intelligence services continued to liquidate the remnants of his empire. A series of operations were carried out to detain the remaining members of his organization. Many of them tried to escape, but most were caught thanks to information received from Charles and his closest associates. Charles's life in prison was harsh. He was always under surveillance, and his every move was controlled. But he remained calm and confident, knowing that he had done everything possible to build his empire and protect it. Even behind bars, his mind continued to work, and he did not give up trying to develop new plans. Gradually, his name began to fade from the news, and new criminals took his place in crime chronicles. However, the legend of Charles lived on in the memories of those who knew him and encountered him. His ability to evade justice, audacity, and cunning became an example for many who aspired to power and wealth. In the end, Charles accepted that his era was over. He left behind a legacy that will live long after he is gone. His story became a lesson for those who tried to follow in his footsteps, a reminder that everyone, even the most cunning criminal, will sooner or later meet his end. Thus ended the story of Charles, a legendary criminal genius whose name and deeds will be remembered for a long time. His journey was full of ups and downs, victories and defeats, but he left an indelible mark on the world of crime. The world continued to turn and new legends replaced old ones, but Charles's story will live on as a reminder of the power of the mind and the inexorability of fate. Third criminal story. Little Tony grew up in a poor area of a big city. His childhood passed on narrow streets, where every building was imbued with the spirit of the struggle for survival. Tony's father was a simple factory worker, and his mother worked in a laundry. Money in the family was always in short supply, and little Tony realized early on that the world around him was not fair. His first hobby was shiny things. At the age of 6, he could spend hours looking at store windows, admiring the shimmer of precious stones and metals. He was attracted to everything that glittered, from cheap jewelry to expensive jewelry. At school, Tony was a mediocre student and was more interested in street games and adventures. When Tony was 10 years old, his older brother Frankie, already involved with a local gang, decided to teach him some tricks. He showed Tony how to deftly hide small things in his pockets, how to avoid the glances of security guards in stores. Tony was a quick learner and soon became a master of petty theft. One day, while walking around the city, Tony noticed one of the local gangsters entering a jewelry store. The store window, filled with the glitter of jewelry, fascinated him. He was as if bewitched. He could not take his eyes off the shine of stones and gold. At that moment, Tony realized that his life would be connected with these sparkling treasures. Tony grew, and his skill grew along with him. By the age of 15, he was already known among local criminals as a talented thief. He liked the feeling of risk, the adrenaline that filled him with every theft. But he always strived for more. Petty thefts no longer brought satisfaction. His dreams became more and more ambitious. He wanted to reach a level where he could rob the most prestigious jewelry stores in the city. One day when he was 17, Tony met Joe, an old and experienced thief. Joe was a legend in the criminal world, and his name inspired fear and respect. Tony was amazed when Joe noticed him and offered to become his student. Joe saw potential in young Tony and decided to teach him all the intricacies of the craft. The training under Joe's leadership proved to be harsh and demanding. He taught Tony planning, reconnaissance, studying security systems, and working with modern technology. They spent their days studying building plans together, their nights monitoring security and alarm systems. Joe said that real theft starts long before you walk into the store. The first major raid occurred when Tony turned 20. It was the perfect robbery. They carefully examined a jewelry store in the city center, which was famous for its collection of rare stones. The plan was developed down to the smallest detail, from the time when the guards changed to the evacuation route. Tony and Joe worked harmoniously, like two elements of one mechanism. The raid went perfectly and they took away millions of dollars worth of jewelry. This success strengthened Tony's reputation. He became a legend. People began to pronounce his name with respect and fear. Tony knew this was just the beginning. Now that he had money and experience, he could plan even more ambitious raids. His goal was clear: to become the most famous and successful jewelry store robber in history. Shortly after the successful robbery, Tony decided it was time to expand his operation. He realized that to achieve even greater heights, he needed a team capable of carrying out complex tasks. Tony began looking for the best specialists in the business: burglars, alarm experts, drivers who could escape any pursuit. He assembled a team, each member of which was a master in his field. One of the first to join his team was Vinny, a safe cracker with an unrivaled reputation. Vinny could open any safe, be it an old mechanical one or the most modern electronic one. He was followed by Mark, a security expert who could bypass any alarm system. The driver was Louis, known for his incredible driving skills and ability to evade pursuit. The last member of the team was Sam, an experienced intelligence officer who could quietly enter any building and collect all the necessary information. Tony's team's first major case was carefully planned. They targeted a large jewelry store in an elite area of the city. This store was known for its inaccessibility and strong security system. Tony and his team studied it for weeks, developing the perfect plan. They conducted reconnaissance, collected all the data on security systems, employee work schedules, and possible escape routes. The day of the robbery has arrived. All team members were in their places, acting clearly and harmoniously. Vinny quickly opened the safe, Mark neutralized the alarm, and Sam watched the security. Tony coordinated the team's actions, keeping track of time and controlling every step. Louis was waiting for them in the car, ready to take off at any moment. The robbery went flawlessly. Tony and his team walked away with millions of dollars worth of jewelry. This raid became a real sensation in the criminal world. They managed to bypass the most sophisticated security system without anyone getting hurt. It was the perfect crime. After this success, Tony's team continued its activities, improving methods and developing more and more complex and ambitious plans. Tony became a legend not only among criminals, but also among police officers. His name inspired fear and admiration. He has become an uncatchable ghost, and his success has led many to question the safety of their jewelry stores. Tony grew, and his skill grew along with him. By the age of 15, he was already known among local criminals as a talented thief. He liked the feeling of risk, the adrenaline that filled him with every theft, but he always strived for more. Petty thefts no longer brought satisfaction. His dreams became more and more ambitious. He wanted to reach a level where he could rob the most prestigious jewelry stores in the city. One day, when he was 17, Tony met Joe, an old and experienced thief. Joe was a legend in the criminal world, and his name inspired fear and respect. Tony was amazed when Joe noticed him and offered to become his student. Joe saw potential in young Tony and decided to teach him all the intricacies of the craft. The training under Joe's leadership proved to be harsh and demanding. He taught Tony planning, reconnaissance, studying security systems, and working with modern technology. They spent their days studying building plans together, their nights monitoring security and alarm systems. Joe said that real theft starts long before you walk into the store. The first major raid occurred when Tony turned 20. It was the perfect robbery. They carefully examined a jewelry store in the city center, which was famous for its collection of rare stones. The plan was developed down to the smallest detail, from the time when the guards changed to the evacuation route. Tony and Joe worked harmoniously, like two elements of one mechanism. The raid went perfectly and they took away millions of dollars worth of jewelry. This success strengthened Tony's reputation. He became a legend. People began to pronounce his name with respect and fear. Tony knew this was just the beginning. Now that he had money and experience, he could plan even more ambitious raids. His goal was clear: to become the most famous and successful jewelry store robber in history. The fame of Tony and his team continued to grow. Their robberies became more and more daring and sophisticated. They entered the most guarded jewelry stores, leaving neither a trace nor a clue for the police. Each new case confirmed their unsurpassed skills. However, fame and success attracted not only admiration but also attention. Police and federal agents began to intensively hunt for Tony and his team. They created special units that were dedicated only to their capture. Articles and reports dedicated to the legendary robbers appeared in newspapers and on television. Tony and his men were hunted by the best detectives in the country. In response, Tony began to use even more ingenious tricks. He changed his working methods, introduced new safety rules, and became more careful. Each new case was planned with double care. Tony understood that the slightest mistake could cost them their freedom and possibly their lives. One of the most complex robberies was a raid on the largest jewelry store in Los Angeles. This store was a real fortress: thick armored doors, modern security systems, 24-hour video surveillance and security. But it was precisely such challenges that attracted Tony and his team. Preparation for this task took several months. They studied guard shift schedules, tested security systems, and analyzed all possible entry and exit routes. Every detail was thought out to the smallest detail. On the day of the robbery, all team members acted as a single mechanism. Vinny opened the armored doors. Mark disabled the alarm. Sam watched the guards through surveillance cameras, and Louis prepared a car for a quick escape. Tony coordinated all actions, keeping the situation under complete control. Their plan worked perfectly, and within minutes they were on their way to their hideout with their next loot. But luck may not always be on the side of criminals. This time, the police were prepared. Using newly installed tracking technology, they were able to quickly locate Tony's car. A chase began, in which Louis showed all his driving skills, but the police did not lag behind. Tony understood that now their lives would change. They can no longer be just ghosts that no one can catch. They have become the #1 target for all law enforcement agencies in the country. Now every step must be even more thoughtful. Every plan must be impeccable. Tony knew that this was only the beginning of a new, even more dangerous game. The chase was long and tense. Louis used all his skills to confuse his pursuers. Sharp turns, escapes through narrow alleys, and unexpected maneuvers. Finally, they managed to escape, and the team reached one of their secret hideouts. But the tension did not leave them. They understood that now the police would pursue them even harder. Despite the risk, Tony wasn't going to stop. He gathered the team to discuss the future. Everyone understood that now their every move would be under scrutiny, and they needed to find new ways to remain unnoticed. Tony suggested they temporarily stop robberies and focus on developing new methods and technologies that would allow them to continue their activities without attracting attention. For several months, the team worked to create new plans and improve their arsenal. Mark developed new ways to bypass alarms. Vinny studied modern safes and methods of breaking them, and Louis trained in extreme conditions, improving his driving skills. Tony at this time was exploring possible targets for future raids and looking for new safe havens. Soon, it was time for a new business. This time the target was a jewelry store in San Francisco, known for its collection of rare jewelry. This store was considered one of the most secure in the country, and that was why Tony chose it. He wanted to show that his team was capable of the impossible. The plan was worked out in detail. They decided to use innovative technologies to hack and bypass security systems. Mark installed special devices that turned off the alarms and security cameras for a few minutes, giving them plenty of time to work. Vinny studied safes and developed a unique method of opening them that was almost silent and left no traces of forced entry. On the day of the robbery, everything went according to plan. They entered the store, disabled the alarm and cameras, opened safes, and took jewelry. But an unexpected surprise awaited them on their way out. The police, alerted to suspicious activity in the area, cordoned off the building. Tony and his team are trapped. Tony quickly assessed the situation and made a decision. He sent Sam and Vinny through underground communications, which they had previously studied as an alternate escape route. Mark and Louis stayed behind to distract the police and give the main team time to leave. They set off a series of false alarms that confused the police and led them on a car chase, diverting attention to themselves. Eventually, Tony and the remaining team members were able to escape undetected. Despite the stress and risk, the robbery was successful, and they were able to escape again. But Tony understood that with each new case, their situation became more and more dangerous. He knew that there were still many challenges ahead, and they must be prepared for any surprises. Now they were faced with a new task: to find a way to continue their activities while remaining elusive and invincible. Tony was confident that with his team they would be able to overcome any difficulties and become true legends in the world of crime. After a tense escape from San Francisco, Tony's team decided to lay low. They moved to a small town where no one knew their faces or names. There, they rented an old house on the outskirts, which became their temporary refuge. At this point, they were able to rest and think about their next steps. Tony understood that now they were being pursued not only by the police, but also by other criminal groups who wanted to get his team or eliminate competitors. Therefore, he developed a new plan of action, which included not only robberies, but also protection from possible threats. One evening, sitting at a table with maps and plans, Tony realized the need to reconsider his methods. Times were changing, and they needed to keep up with technology. Mark had to start searching for and developing new hacking devices. Vinny needed to update his skills and learn about modern safes. Louis had to find new routes and hiding places to escape. Sam continued to do reconnaissance, but now with an emphasis on security. Everyone understood that in their world there was no room for mistakes and miscalculations. Every action had to be carefully planned and checked. Several months have passed. The team continued to train and improve. They studied new technologies, tested equipment, and developed complex plans. Tony was in no hurry. He wanted to make sure the next raid would go perfectly. And then the day came when they were ready. This time the target was a jewelry store in New York, known for its unique jewelry and precious stones. The store was equipped with the latest security systems, and this is what attracted Tony. They carefully prepared for this matter. Mark created a device that temporarily disabled all electronic systems. Vinny studied the structure of safes and developed a method for quickly opening them. Sam collected all possible information about the store's operating hours and security, and Louis prepared several escape routes. The robbery began late at night. Tony and his team entered the building through an underground tunnel that they had dug in advance. Mark quickly turned off the alarm and Vinny began opening the safes. Everything was going according to plan until Sam noticed the guards approaching. Tony immediately assessed the situation and made a decision. He sent Vinny and Mark to the exit to take out the jewelry, while he stayed with Louis and Sam to hold off the guards. They set off a small diversionary explosive device, which stunned the guards and gave the main team time to escape. When Tony, Louis, and Sam got out, Vinny and Mark were already waiting for them in the car. Lewis stepped on the gas and they disappeared into the night, leaving behind only signs of a break-in and a trash store. This raid was another victory for Tony's team. They once again proved that they can cope with any difficulties and emerge victorious. But Tony knew that every successful raid brought them closer to the next test. There was no peace in their world, and they had to be always ready. Now they were faced with new tasks. Tony planned to strengthen ties with other criminal groups to gain additional protection and information. He understood that even more difficult and dangerous things lay ahead of them, and they must be prepared for anything. Tony and his team continued to move forward, leaving behind a trail of legendary robberies and elusive criminals. Their story continued, and no one knew how it would end. After a successful robbery in New York, Tony's team again lay low. They moved to a secluded house in the mountains, where they could calmly plan their further actions. Tony understood that the greater their success, the greater the pressure from the police and criminal competitors. In their new hideout, they focused on improving their skills and developing new technologies. Mark experimented with new devices for hacking electronic security systems. Vinny studied the latest models of safes and how to open them. Louis trained in extreme conditions to be prepared for any surprises on the road. And Sam continued to collect information on possible targets and threats. At the same time, Tony worked to strengthen ties with other criminal groups. He knew it would be difficult to face the growing threat from police and competitors alone. He began to establish contacts with influential crime bosses, concluding agreements on mutual support and exchange of information. One day, Tony received information about a major jewelry exhibition that was to be held in Las Vegas. This event attracted his attention due to the enormous value of the exhibits and the high concentration of precious stones and jewelry in one place. However, he also understood that security at this exhibition would be of the highest level, and it would take months of preparation to develop a flawless plan. Tony and his team began studying the site. Sam spent several weeks gathering information about the exhibit, security systems, staff schedules, and possible entry and exit routes. Mark developed a special device that could temporarily neutralize alarms and video surveillance systems. Vinny prepared a new method for opening safes, which was supposed to go unnoticed even by the most modern security systems. On the day of the robbery, the team was ready for action. They entered the exhibition under the guise of maintenance workers, which allowed them to quietly install devices to disable alarms and video surveillance. When everything was ready, they began the robbery. Mark neutralized the security systems, Vinny opened the safes, and Tony and Sam controlled the process, keeping track of time and coordinating the team's actions. Everything was going according to plan until one of the guards accidentally noticed suspicious activity. Panic set in, and Tony's team found themselves in a difficult situation. They quickly collected the jewelry and headed to the exit, where Lewis was waiting for them with the car. The chase was inevitable, and Lewis had to use all his skills to escape the pursuit. Despite all the difficulties, Tony and his team emerged victorious again. They were able to escape with the loot and leave the police and guards behind. This raid was another confirmation of their skill and ability to cope with any difficulties. However, Tony knew that with each new case they became more visible and vulnerable. He began to think about the future, realizing that they would either have to find a way to get out of the game or continue to improve and stay one step ahead of their enemies. The story of Tony and his team continued. They moved forward, leaving behind a trail of legendary robberies and elusive criminals. No one knew what lay ahead, but one thing was clear: they were not going to stop. After the successful robbery of the jewelry warehouse, Tony's team continued to develop their legal businesses. Investing in the hotel business and restaurant chain turned out to be a good decision. These enterprises brought in a stable income and served as an excellent cover for their main activities. Tony began to think about expanding his business in order to further strengthen his position and secure the team. However, Their quiet life could not last forever. Tony soon received information about a large shipment of rare jewelry that was to be delivered to a private collection in Miami. This shipment was of great value, and security would be at the highest level. Tony understood that this business would be extremely risky, but the profit could provide them for a long time. Tony and his team began preparing for a new business. Sam spent several weeks in Miami collecting information about the transport route, security systems, and schedules. Mark developed an advanced device for hacking modern security systems that could temporarily disable all electronic devices within a radius of several hundred meters. Vinny studied all possible models of safes in which jewelry could be transported and developed a plan to open them. Louis prepared several escape routes, taking into account all possible obstacles and pursuits. The day of the robbery was chosen carefully. They decided to act at the moment when the convoy with jewelry would pass through the least guarded section of the road. Sam installed hidden cameras and sensors in advance to monitor the movement of the guards and promptly warn the team about possible changes in the schedule. As the convoy approached its intended location, Mark activated a device that temporarily disabled all electronic systems within range. The security vehicle stopped and Tony's team quickly got down to business. Vinny opened the safes. Sam and Tony controlled the guards, and Louis waited in the car, ready for a quick retreat. Everything went according to plan, and the team was able to retrieve the jewelry without firing a shot. They disappeared as quickly as they had appeared, leaving the guards confused. Louis chose one of the pre-arranged routes, and they quickly left the city, leaving the police far behind. Returning to their hideout, the team counted their loot. This was one of their most successful robberies. Now they not only had money, but also rare jewelry that could be sold on the black market for huge sums. Tony decided that part of the funds would be invested in further expansion of the legal business, and the rest would be used to improve their criminal activities. They continued to develop their legal businesses, opening new hotels and restaurants in different cities. This allowed them not only to hide their income, but also to provide a stable income in case they decided to move away from criminal activities. However, Tony understood that sooner or later their path would cross with serious opponents. He began to strengthen ties with other criminal groups, forming alliances and mutual support agreements. Tony knew that even more difficult and dangerous challenges lay ahead, but he was confident in his team and their ability to cope with any difficulties. After the robbery in Los Angeles, Tony and his team realized that they had reached a new level of skill and fame. Their successes attracted the attention of not only the police, but also the criminal world. Tony's influence grew, and he became a figure to be reckoned with by even the most powerful crime bosses. However, with this fame came new threats. Soon Tony learned about a major jewelry exhibition that was to be held in Dubai. This exhibition brought together the rarest and most expensive jewelry from all over the world under one roof. The event's security was top-notch, but that's what attracted Tony. He saw in this business not only huge profits but also an opportunity to prove that his team was capable of the impossible. Tony began to prepare for this task with special care. Sam went to Dubai to gather information about the exhibition location, security systems, and daily routine. He spent several weeks studying the building's plans, monitoring security, and analyzing possible entry and exit routes. Mark has developed a new device capable of hacking the most advanced security systems used at the exhibition. Vinny studied all possible models of safes and vaults, and Louis developed an escape plan, taking into account the peculiarities of the local infrastructure. The preparation took several months. On the day of the robbery, the team was ready for action. They entered the exhibition building under the guise of technical personnel, which allowed them to quietly install devices to disable alarms and video surveillance. When everything was ready, they began the robbery. Mark neutralized the security systems. Vinny opened the safes, and Tony and Sam controlled the process, keeping track of time and coordinating the team's actions. Everything was going according to plan until one of the guards noticed suspicious activity. Panic set in and the team found themselves in a difficult situation. Tony quickly assessed the situation and decided to retreat. They collected everything they had time to take and headed towards the exit, where Louis was waiting for them with the car. The chase was inevitable, and Louis had to use all his skills to escape the pursuit. Despite the difficulties, the team managed to escape with the loot. Louis chose one of the pre-arranged routes and they quickly left Dubai. Returning to their shelter, they counted their loot. It was one of their riskiest, but also most profitable robberies. Tony understood that with each new case they became more visible and vulnerable. He began to think about the future. Perhaps it's time to change your approach to business, go into the shadows, or end your criminal career altogether. However, he also knew that his thirst for adrenaline and the desire to stay on top would not allow him to give up his activity so easily. The team soon decided that they needed some time to rest and re-evaluate their plans. They went to a remote place where they could calmly discuss their further actions. Tony understood that they had to be prepared for any eventuality and continue to improve their skills. The story of Tony and his team continued. They moved forward, leaving behind them a trail of legendary robberies and elusive criminals. No one knew how their journey would end, but one thing was clear. They were not going to stop. I understand. Let's try changing the style. After a robbery in Dubai, Tony and his team fled to the mountains. They understood that they needed to lay low and think about their next steps. Time passed slowly, but their minds were busy analyzing past operations and planning for future ones. At this time, Tony received information about an upcoming auction in London, where unique jewelry was to be exhibited. This was an opportunity that could not be missed. But this time he decided to change tactics. Instead of brute force and quick escapes, Tony decided to use cunning and deception. They contacted a couple of experienced scammers, Maddie and Victor. These two were masters of disguise and could easily fit into any society. Maddie was a former actress, and Victor was a professional illusionist. Their skills were ideal for carrying out the plan. At the auction, Maddie and Victor portrayed wealthy collectors. They behaved confidently without arousing suspicion. Victor entertained the guests with his magic tricks, diverting attention while Maddie carefully studied the exhibits and security systems. At the right moment, Victor staged a real performance. He staged an accident, which attracted the attention of all the guards. At this time, Maddie, taking advantage of the confusion, disappeared with the jewelry. Everything went smoothly and no one noticed the decorations were missing until Maddie and Victor left the building. The next morning, the entire team gathered at their hideout. Tony, looking at the spoils, felt proud of the work done, but he knew that many more challenges awaited them ahead. With each new case, their situation became more and more dangerous, but this did not stop them. They were ready for any difficulties and continued to move forward, leaving a trail of legendary robberies behind them. Now that they had successfully pulled off the sting operation, Tony began to think about how they could use this method in the future. The team decided that they needed to find even more talented people to expand their capabilities and remain elusive. So, their story continued. With each new task, they became more and more skillful and inventive. But one thing remained unchanged. They were not going to stop and were ready for any challenges that fate would throw at them. Tony and his team are firmly established in their hideout, enjoying the temporary lull after a series of successful robberies. They had millions of dollars worth of jewelry in their hands, but they knew that this was just the beginning. Soon, they were presented with a new challenge: rumors of treasure in Monte Carlo. The place was legendary, as were the security measures surrounding it. The evening was quiet as Tony gathered the team to discuss the new plan. On the table lay shop drawings, security system diagrams, and photographs of potential targets. There was tension in the room, but also anticipation. Tony looked at the map, his fingers running over the routes they could use to escape. Sam, sitting opposite, listened carefully and took notes. He was their intelligence officer, and his task was to understand every detail, every weakness of the security systems. Vinny studied the drawings of safes, his mind analyzing possible methods of opening. Mark was working on a device that could disable alarms and cameras for quite a long time. Louis laid out escape routes, his experience as a driver indispensable. The day has come. The team was in place. Tony stood on the roof of a nearby building watching the store through binoculars. Below, Sam, dressed as a utility worker, ran a cable through the ventilation shaft. Vinny and Mark waited in the car, ready for action. Louis, sitting behind the wheel, kept the engine ready. Sam gave the signal. Vinny and Mark quickly entered the building, using the cable as a guide. They moved quietly and quickly, avoiding cameras and sensors. Mark installed the device, and all the cameras in the building went dark. Vinny began to open the safe. His movements were confident and precise. Tony kept track of the time. Every second mattered. Suddenly, a patrol appeared on the street. Tony signaled to Louis, who slowly drove out into the street, distracting the attention of the police. Mark and Vinny finished their work and quickly left the building. They disappeared as quickly as they appeared. There was silence in the car, but each of them felt the tension that they had just experienced. Tony, looking at his team, realized that this was one of the most difficult cases, but they did it. They were once again one step ahead. After a successful case in Monte Carlo, Tony and his team reconvened at their hideout. They felt at the peak of their career, but realized that they could not stop there. Seeking a new challenge, they began discussing their next goal. Sam's intelligence brought news of the largest jewelry store in Chicago, Diamonds of Chicago. This store was famous for its collection of unique jewelry and unprecedented security measures. Tony carefully studied the reports and diagrams Sam provided. The store was equipped with the latest security systems, including laser sensors, facial recognition cameras, and armored doors. Tony knew that success would require not only their skill, but also their innovative approach. Preparations for the robbery took several months. Sam went to Chicago disguised as a tourist and carefully examined the store. He photographed, recorded, and analyzed every detail. Vinny was researching new models of safes that could be used in the store, and Mark was working on creating a device that could break into complex security systems. Louis spent time behind the wheel, plotting possible escape routes and honing his driving skills. The day of the robbery arrived. Tony gathered the team in a room for one final discussion of the plan. Everyone knew their role and was ready to act. Sam was the first to enter the store through the ventilation system. He disabled the laser sensors and cameras, allowing Vinny and Mark to enter safely. Vinny began opening the safes, his movements fast and precise. Mark used his device to hack into security systems and ensure the alarms didn't go off. Tony, watching the process from the roof of a nearby building, kept track of time and coordinated the team's actions. Suddenly he noticed that one of the guards began to suspect something was wrong and headed towards the vault. Tony signaled to Louis, who was ready to distract the guard's attention. Louis, sitting behind the wheel of his car, sharply turned onto the sidewalk, attracting the attention of security. This gave the team enough time to complete their work and exit the building. They quickly got into the car and fled the crime scene. The chase was tense, but Louis, using his skills, managed to evade the pursuit. The team headed to a previously prepared shelter where they could safely hide and share the spoils. When they reached safety, Tony and his team finally relaxed. They knew they had pulled off one of the most daring robberies of their careers. Each of them felt proud of the work done and joy from the successful completion of the task. But they also understood that with each new robbery, the risk increased. The police intensified their efforts, and competitors became more dangerous. Tony knew that new challenges lay ahead of them, and they must be prepared for any surprises. Chicago was full of rumors about a criminal gang that managed to pull off several high-profile robberies. The police strained every effort to find and apprehend the elusive criminals. Tony and his team were feeling the pressure. Every day became a test for them. In the dark corners of the city, they gathered in secret places, discussing plans and taking precautions. The police knew the team was skilled and meticulous. Each team member now lived undercover, avoiding unnecessary attention. Tony made a decision. They needed to disappear for a while to confuse the police. They began to change their appearance and move only at night. Sam, possessing the skills of a master intelligence officer, began to infiltrate criminal circles to collect information about the police and possible traitors. The team assigned roles and responsibilities. Vinny began searching for a safe haven. Mark developed new hacking and security devices, and Lewis improved his driving skills in case they had to quickly escape. Tony, as a leader, coordinated all actions and ensured that every step was carefully thought out. Meanwhile, Chicago police launched a large-scale operation to search for criminals. The streets were patrolled around the clock. Searches were carried out in suspicious places, and everyone who might have some connection with the gang was interrogated. Tony decided to take drastic measures. He contacted an old ally, a man named Jack, who had extensive connections in the criminal world and could help them escape for a while. Jack offered them shelter in one of his facilities outside the city, where they could wait out the most dangerous period. Once in a new place, Tony's team began to regain strength and think through next steps. They knew that the police would not retreat, but they were ready for new challenges. Each of them was a master of his craft, and together they were an invincible force. Meanwhile, the police continued to search, but Tony's team was always one step ahead. Using their skills and connections, they found ways to avoid traps and persecution. Their goal was clear: to remain free and continue their activities, despite all the obstacles. Every new day was a new battle for them, but they did not give up. Their story continued, and no one knew how it would end. Tony and his team settled into a shelter provided by Jack. The place was ideal to wait out the time and prepare for new challenges. They knew that staying in one place all the time was unsafe, and therefore decided to act with extreme caution. The team used the time spent in hiding to develop new techniques and strategies. Mark worked to create improved hacking devices that could bypass the latest security systems. Vinny studied new models of safes and practiced opening them. Louis practiced in extreme conditions to be prepared for any eventualities on the road. Tony, as always, oversaw the overall coordination of actions. He understood that their safety depended on a carefully thought-out plan and coordinated teamwork. Every night they met to discuss their steps and analyze the current situation. Sam, with his intelligence skills, continued to gather information about police activities and possible threats. Meanwhile, in Chicago, the police did not give up. Task forces worked around the clock, trying to find even the slightest clue that could lead them to the trail of the gang. They checked all possible connections and sources, interrogated informants, and conducted searches. One day, Sam, who was following the news and police channels, brought important information. The police were preparing a major operation to capture a well-known crime boss who could be associated with Tony and his team. This meant that their cover could be blown. Tony decided to be proactive. He contacted Jack and agreed on a new hiding place. Jack offered them an old warehouse on the outskirts of the city, which had not been used for a long time and was out of sight of the police. The team quickly gathered and moved to a new location. At the new warehouse, they continued their preparations. Tony began planning a new business that would not only bring them significant profits, but also divert the attention of the police from their group. The target was a large bank in the city center that held significant amounts of cash and valuables. The team developed a detailed plan. Sam did some reconnaissance, studying the bank's operating hours and security systems. Mark and Vinny prepared the necessary equipment for hacking. Lewitt developed a quick escape route. The day of the operation was chosen carefully. The timing was chosen to minimize risks and ensure maximum safety. Vinny and Mark entered the bank through an underground tunnel prepared in advance by Sam. They quickly turned off the alarms and cameras, giving the team the necessary time to act. Everything was going according to plan until one of the guards accidentally noticed suspicious activity. Panic set in, and the team found themselves in a difficult situation. Tony quickly assessed the situation and decided to act. They gathered everything they could and headed for the exit. Louis was waiting for them in the car, ready for a quick escape. He skillfully drove the car out of the city using a pre-prepared route. The police were on their tail, but Louis used all his skills to evade pursuit. Returning to the shelter, the team realized that their plan had worked, but the risks were increasing. They knew that the police would increase their efforts and they needed to be even more careful. After a successful but risky bank robbery, Tony and his team knew they needed to rethink their actions and perhaps even change their strategy. The police stepped up their measures, and each operation became more and more dangerous. It was then that Tony decided that it was time to move away from traditional robberies and look for new, less risky ways to make money. Tony suggested that the team start investing in cyberspace. In a world where digital technology plays an increasingly important role, cybercrime has been a vast area of activity. Of course, this required new skills and knowledge. Mark, the technical genius of the team, accepted the challenge to learn the necessary technologies and techniques. Over the next months, Mark delved deeper into learning programming and cybersecurity. He began developing tools that could hack complex financial systems without physically being in buildings. Vinny and Sam helped him by collecting information about potential targets, banks that could become their new victims in the digital world. Louis, who had always been the team's driver and logistician, began to feel redundant in this new scheme. Tony realized that he could not allow such a valuable team member to feel unused, and assigned him the task of creating a logistics network for the movement and laundering of digital assets. Louis set up a system that allowed the team to remain anonymous and safe while operating in cyberspace. A few months later, the team was ready for its first major cyber raid. The target was an international bank with a weakly protected information system. Mark created a virus that successfully penetrated the bank system, giving the team access to millions of dollars. The operation went smoothly, and the team celebrated their first success in their new field. However, Tony understood that success would attract the attention of not only the police, but also other cybercriminals. They had to be ready for new challenges. By changing their methods, Tony and his team became true masters of cyberspace. They realized that in the world of technology, the possibilities are endless, and they can achieve their goals while remaining in the shadows. The story of Tony and his team has received a new chapter. Each new day was full of challenges and opportunities. Their path continued, leading them through the dark streets of Chicago to the digital jungle of the global network. Got it. Thanks for your patience. Let's move on to the continuation of the story without repetition. Chicago. The season has changed, and with it, the lives of Tony and his team have changed. They no longer only engaged in physical robberies. Moving into the digital space required different skills and strategies. At this time, Mark proposed a new direction: hacking cryptocurrency exchanges. The work began with reconnaissance. Sam used his connections and skills to gather information on several major exchanges. Mark and Vinny conducted a detailed analysis of their security systems. Louis has developed a logistics network for the movement and laundering of digital assets to minimize the risks of detection. The new operation required extreme caution and precision. They chose a target, one of the largest cryptocurrency exchanges, known for its huge transaction volume. The plan was carefully thought out. On the night of the operation, Mark introduced a virus that allowed them to gain access to the internal systems of the exchange. Every action was synchronized. Mark and Vinny supervised the hacking process, while Sam observed the situation and monitored possible threats. Lewis, from a secure location, coordinated logistics to immediately transfer the stolen funds to multiple anonymous accounts. The entire process went smoothly. The team was able to withdraw a significant amount of cryptocurrency without leaving a trace. Immediately after the transaction was completed, they transferred the funds through a complex network of anonymous accounts and exchangers to make them untraceable. Soon after, news channels began to report reports of a major attack on a cryptocurrency exchange. Experts and analysts discussed methods and possible culprits, but no one suspected that Tony's team was behind it. Every day they became more experienced and inventive. Tony understood that the world was changing, and they had to change with it to stay one step ahead. Tony soon came up with a new idea: use their skills to create his own network of anonymous cryptocurrency exchanges. This would allow them not only to launder stolen funds, but also to earn commissions by serving other clients in the shadows. The team accepted this challenge. They began to develop and build their network, gradually expanding their influence in the world of cybercrime. They understood that every new step brings new risks, but also new opportunities. And so, their story continued. Tony and his team have continually adapted to change, remaining elusive and successful in their business. The world around them was changing, but they were always ready for new challenges, moving forward with confidence and determination. Rumors of Tony's elusive team carrying out a series of daring robberies and cyber attacks spread far beyond Chicago. Their successes and ability to evade justice attracted the attention not only of the police, but also of one of the country's most famous detectives, Detective Alexander Harper. Harper was a legend in his field. He solved the most complicated crimes and had a flair that allowed him to catch many dangerous criminals. He was invited to Chicago to help the local police deal with Tony's team and put an end to their criminal activities. When Harper arrived in town, he immediately began studying all available materials on cases related to Tony and his team. He carefully analyzed their every move, every robbed object, every piece of evidence left behind. Unlike other detectives, Harper understood that Tony's team was not just a group of thieves, but real professionals using modern technology and cunning plans. Harper began his work by interviewing witnesses and analyzing video footage from crime scenes. He noticed that all the team's actions were carefully planned and coordinated, but he found a few small details that could lead him to Tony. He noticed certain patterns in the team's actions that could indicate their next steps. Meanwhile, Tony and his team were unaware of Harper's arrival, but sensed that police pressure was increasing. They continued to develop their network of anonymous cryptocurrency exchangers and carry out cyber attacks. But Tony understood that with each new case they became more and more vulnerable. One evening, while sitting in his hideout, Tony received a message from one of his informants. It spoke of Harper's arrival in Chicago and his intention to catch them. Tony realized that they now had one of the best detectives in the country against them, and that they needed to be even more careful and resourceful. Tony gathered the team to discuss new security measures. They decided to use more sophisticated methods to protect their operations and reduce the number of active cases. Mark began working on improving his devices. Vinny strengthened security measures for the vaults, and Sam went deeper into intelligence to learn more about Harper's plans. Harper, meanwhile, continued his hunt. He knew Tony's team was smart and cautious, but he believed he could find their weak spot. He began to use his connections and experience to infiltrate the criminal underworld of Chicago and obtain information about the location of the team. One day, Harper received a tip from an old informant who claimed to know one of the team's possible hideouts. Wasting no time, the detective organized a capture operation. When the police burst into the building, They found only an empty room and signs of a hasty exit. Tony and his team knew Harper was on their trail. They realized that their time was running out and they needed to find a way to get rid of it. Tony proposed a plan that would not only confuse Harper, but also leave him without support. The story continued, and with each passing day, the confrontation between Tony and Harper became more intense. Tony knew that in order to stay free, they would have to use all their skills and intelligence to deceive one of the best detectives in the country. Tony and his team realized that in order to confuse Detective Harper, they needed to develop something special. The detective's attention was focused on their past operations, and this could be used to their advantage. Tony gathered the team to discuss the plan. The room was quiet. Everyone listened to the leader's words, understanding the seriousness of the situation. Mark came up with the idea of creating a series of false leads that would lead Harper down the wrong path. This had to be not just a distraction, but a whole network of false evidence leading to a fake crime. The team began working on this plan. Sam, using his intelligence skills, studied Harper's habits and routes to figure out how best to deceive him. Vinny and Mark developed devices and fake evidence that were designed to look as believable as possible. Lewis studied possible routes for quick escapes and prepared several hiding places. One evening, Tony's team began to implement the plan. They organized a fake robbery of a large jewelry warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Everything was prepared to look like their handwriting: locks picked, alarms disabled, and carefully placed footprints. However, this time they left several new clues that should have led Harper to a false hideout. When police arrived on the scene, Harper immediately noticed similarities to previous robberies. He carefully studied all the evidence, following every new lead. False tracks led him along a confusing path through several abandoned buildings and underground tunnels. Harper was confident he was on the right track. During this time, Tony and his team observed the detective's actions from afar, using cameras and listening devices. They saw Harper falling further into their trap, following false leads. The team understood that every step must be precisely verified so as not to arouse suspicion. As Harper approached the decoy, the team prepared the final act. In the abandoned building where Tony and his men were supposed to be hiding, they left a lot of fake evidence that was supposed to finally convince Harper of his success. However, instead of criminals, the detective found only empty rooms and traps that blocked his escape routes. Harper realized that he had been deceived. Anger and disappointment overwhelmed him, but he knew that this game was not over yet. He swore that he would find Tony and his team, despite all their tricks. Meanwhile, Tony and his men used the time they had gained to move to a new shelter. They understood that their confrontation with Harper was becoming increasingly difficult and dangerous. They needed to be even more careful and smarter to stay one step ahead. At the new shelter, they discussed next steps. Tony suggested temporarily pausing large operations and focusing on strengthening its network and security. The team agreed, knowing they needed time to prepare for their next moves. The story of Tony and his team continued. They knew that Harper would not back down and would search for them to the last. But they were also confident in their abilities and readiness for new challenges. Their confrontation with the legendary detective became increasingly tense, and no one knew how it would end. Sure, let's figure out how Detective Harper was able to catch Tony and his team. Harper did not give up despite the setbacks. He continued to carefully analyze every detail, every trace left by Tony's team. He realized that in order to catch these criminals, he needed to use an unconventional approach and introduce an element of surprise. Harper began to develop a plan. He knew that Tony and his team were extremely careful and smart, so it was necessary to create an environment in which they would make a mistake. The detective turned to his cybersecurity contacts for help and offered them his theory. Harper decided to use a trap in cyberspace. He developed a fictitious cryptocurrency exchange with visible vulnerabilities to attract the attention of Tony's team. He knew they were always looking for new opportunities and would be interested in potential loot. The crypto-safe cryptocurrency exchange was created from scratch. It looked real, with numerous active users and large amounts of money in their accounts. The vulnerabilities built into the system were carefully hidden, but visible enough to experienced hackers like Mark. Sam, always looking for new goals, quickly came across CryptoSafe. He shared his discovery with the team, and everyone agreed that it was a great opportunity. Mark began preparations for the break-in, unaware that it was an elaborate trap. In the evening, when Mark began the hack, Harper and his team were already ready. They watched his every move in real time. Mark was able to penetrate the system and began transferring funds, unaware that his every action was being monitored. As soon as Mark completed the operation, Harper and his team received the exact coordinates of the location of the criminals. They organized an immediate capture operation. Police and federal agents surrounded the building where Tony and his team were located. Tony quickly realized that they had fallen into a trap, but there was no time to escape. Sirens were heard around the building. Police cars blocked all possible escape routes. Tony, Mark, Vinny, Sam, and Louie were locked inside with no way to escape. Harper personally supervised the operation. He knew that this was his only chance to catch the team that had eluded justice for so long. The police stormed the building, and after a brief resistance, Tony and his team were arrested. Each of them was handcuffed and taken out of the building. Harper looked at them with a sense of satisfaction, knowing that months of effort had finally come to fruition. Tony met the detective's gaze and nodded, acknowledging his skill. Tony's team appeared in court where they were accused of numerous robberies, cyber attacks, and other crimes. They were sentenced to long prison terms, and their legend as elusive criminals finally came to an end. Harper became the hero who caught one of the most dangerous gangs in history and returned to his regular job. But the story of Tony and his team remained in people's memory as an example of genius, ambition, and inevitable retribution for their actions. Following the arrest of Tony and his team, a large-scale process began to assess the damage caused by their criminal activities. Investigators and detectives carefully studied all cases associated with the gang to determine the exact amount of stolen funds and damage caused. They analyzed bank transactions, cryptocurrency transactions, and estimated the value of stolen jewelry and other valuables. It turned out that during their activities, Tony and his team caused damage amounting to more than $20 million. Their daring robberies and cyber attacks affected many companies, banks, and individuals, leaving a trail of destruction and financial loss in their wake. The trial was long and complex. Prosecutors presented a wealth of evidence, including eyewitness accounts, crime scene videos, and data from seized computers. Tony's lawyers tried to soften the charges, but the amount and weight of evidence was too great. The court sentenced Tony and his team to life imprisonment without parole. This sentence became an example of the fact that even the most skillful and resourceful criminals sooner or later face justice. Tony and his team were sent to one of the most secure prisons in the country. Each of them realized that their freedom was now lost forever. Within the prison walls, they often recalled their adventures, robberies, and cyber attacks, realizing that they would never be able to return to their old lives. Harper, having completed the case, continued his career as a detective, but this case forever remained in his memory as one of the most difficult and significant in his life. He often recalled the moment when he was able to catch Tony and his team, and that feeling of satisfaction for the work done never left him. The story of Tony and his team has become a legend in the criminal world and an example for future generations of criminals. They were skilled, cunning, and daring, but in the end, justice caught up with them. Their journey was full of risks and dangers, and although they achieved a lot, the end result showed that crimes always have a price. Tony, sitting in his prison cell, often thought about those days when they were at the top. He understood that their story was unique and exciting, But it ended the same way it began, unexpectedly and quickly. Now his life was confined within four walls, and the only thing that remained were memories of past glory and adventure. The story of Tony and his team came to an end, but their legend lived on, reminding everyone that even the most skilled criminals cannot escape justice forever.